In the vast expanses of the North African desert, under the scorching sun, thousands of years stand colossal evidence of former greatness, the pyramids of Giza. They are not just stone tombs. They are silent sentinels frozen in eternity, whose granite blocks seem to whisper stories of times long past. The air around them is electrified with mystery, and in the shadows of their majestic faces lurk the answers to questions that humanity has been asking itself for centuries. How did a civilization that emerged on the banks of the Nile not only survive, but thrive for 3 millennia, creating a culture that is astounding in its complexity, knowledge, and faith? What made it so resilient, so unwavering in the face of time and change? We look at their ruins today, obelisks, temples, sphinxes, and see only echoes of an incredible past. But where is the key to their amazing longevity? Where are the secrets that have allowed them to survive countless empires, remaining a beacon of stability and greatness in the turbulent flow of history? It is these questions that keep us turning to ancient Egypt again and again, trying to decipher its silence because, in its bottomless wisdom perhaps, there are answers that can change our understanding of human development. The heyday of the kingdom of Osiris is a symphony of longevity. Ancient Egypt is not just a collection of dynasties and pharaohs. It is a civilization, a phenomenon, whose existence for 3 millennia remains unprecedented in the annals of human history. Where else can we find such a unity of culture, religion, art, and statehood, which has remained virtually unchanged for so many epochs? Egypt's heyday was a symphony played on a 1,000-year-old stage, where every chord was carefully calibrated. This greatness was based on the life-giving breath of the Nile. The annual flooding of the river, fertilizing the land with fertile silt, provided an incredibly stable agriculture, which in turn allowed to feed the huge population. This economic stability was the foundation on which not only magnificent structures were built, but also a complex social and political system. The centralized power of the pharaoh, perceived not just as a ruler, but as a living embodiment of God, was the cornerstone of their statehood. The pharaoh was the bridge between the world of men and the gods, the guarantor of cosmic order and justice. This theocratic monarchy provided an amazing cohesion and loyalty that was passed down from generation to generation. The Egyptians were masters not only in construction, but also in engineering, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics. Their knowledge of the stars allowed them to create a calendar that still impresses with its accuracy. Mummification, the standard practice of embalming, was not just a ritual, but evidence of a deep knowledge of anatomy and chemistry. But the main beacon of their achievements, of course, was architecture. From the step pyramid of Djoser to the grandiose temple of Karnak, each structure was not just a building, but a monumental act of faith, an engineering feat, and a symbol of the inviolability of their world. They created a complex system of hieroglyphic writing, which was not only a means of communication, but also a sacred art that carried deep religious and philosophical meanings. Their art, from tomb paintings to sculptures, was permeated with symbolism, striving for eternity and the ideal. It did not aim at realism, but at capturing the divine order and the hope of an afterlife. It was this pervasive religiosity that permeated every aspect of their existence, from birth to death, from everyday affairs to grandiose state projects, that gave Egyptians an incredible sense of purpose and unity. The cult of Osiris, the belief in an afterlife, the idea that life on Earth is only a prelude to eternal existence, gave meaning to their work, their rules, their everything. The secret of their longevity seemed to lie in this perfect harmony between nature, the Nile, the divine, pharaoh, religion, and human genius. They did not fight the world, they sought to be a part of it, reflecting its order in their civilization. This philosophy, this capacity for adaptation and immutability, seemed to guarantee their eternal existence. But even the eternal has its end, or at least its mystery. The great mystery. Why is it forgotten? And here we come to one of the deepest mysteries of ancient Egypt. If this civilization was so resilient, so wise, and so long-lived, why were its secrets, its technologies, its true history, and even its language forgotten for millennia? Why did a grandeur that seemed to have been set in stone for centuries turn into a whisper barely discernible through the desert dust. This is not just the disappearance of an empire, it is the erasure of an entire paradigm. The loss of knowledge that, according to all logical assumptions, should have been passed down from generation to generation. We know about the conquests of the Persians, Greeks, Romans, and Arabs. Each new wave brought with it its own languages, its own religions, its own customs. But even in this process, there are usually bridges, connections that allow you to preserve key aspects of the defeated culture. In the case of Egypt, something more fundamental has happened. Hieroglyphs, once the sacred language of the gods and pharaohs, became a collection of obscure symbols until their meaning was rediscovered thanks to the Rosetta Stone more than 1,500 years after the last hieroglyphic text disappeared. The knowledge of pyramid construction, the most complex medical practices, and the intricacies of religious rituals all seem to vanish into thin air. There is no clear, unambiguous record of a catastrophic event that would have destroyed all Egyptian knowledge overnight. There was not a single fire in the Library of Alexandria that would explain the full extent of the oblivion. Instead, it was a slow but irreversible process. But was it only natural? Could a civilization capable of erecting such monuments and preserving its traditions for centuries simply forget its roots? Or is there something deeper behind this oblivion, something that takes us beyond mere decline? The main mystery lies in the discrepancy between the monumentality of their achievements and the apparent completeness of their disappearance from the collective memory of mankind until the moment of rediscovery. How can you forget such power? How can you lose so much knowledge? This dilemma leads us to believe that it is not just a matter of changing cultural paradigms or political pressures. Perhaps part of this mystery lies in the fact that some knowledge was deliberately hidden, or they were intended only for a narrow circle of initiates who took them with them to the grave or to other worlds. Or even more intriguingly, the very nature of Egyptian knowledge was such that it could not simply be passed on to those who did not possess a certain level of understanding or initiation. It's not just memory loss, it's the silence of a colossus that refuses to reveal its deepest secrets, leaving us facing countless questions with no obvious answers. Traditional explanations, the sand of time, and political currents. The oblivion of ancient Egypt, from the point of view of traditional science, is explained by a slow but inexorable process that combines political, economic, social, and natural factors. It wasn't a momentary collapse, but a gradual decline, like the desert sand slowly but surely covering up a majestic ruin. First of all, constant external invasions and conquests played a key role. Beginning with Persian rule in the 6th century BC, then Greek rule under the Ptolemy, and finally the Roman conquest in the 1st century BC, each new power imposed its own order, its own administrative system, its own culture, and most importantly, its own language. It made no sense for the conquerors to maintain ancient Egyptian traditions if they did not serve their own purposes. The hieroglyphic language was gradually replaced first by Greek and then by Latin and Coptic, turning into a sacred but increasingly less understandable script. The knowledge written on it became inaccessible even to the descendants of the Egyptians themselves. Economic shifts have also contributed. Although the Nile remained fertile, changing trade routes, increasing influence of other regional powers, and shifting world trade centers could undermine Egypt's economic power. Pharaohs and priests, who once had vast resources to support monumental construction and elaborate rituals, may have lost their former influence and wealth. Maintaining giant temples and tombs, which requires huge human and financial resources, has become an unbearable burden for a weakened state. Social and religious changes, they were also an integral part of the decline. With the advent of Christianity and then Islam, the ancient Egyptian gods, cults, and rituals were gradually replaced by new beliefs. Temples were closed, their statues were destroyed or repurposed. The priests, the guardians of ancient knowledge, lost their power and gradually disappeared. As a result, entire layers of Egypt's cultural and intellectual life have ceased to be relevant and actively transmitted. People converted to new religions no longer saw the point of preserving pagan practices and texts. Finally, natural factors, although not as dramatic as a single-stage disaster, also contributed. Climate change, even if minor, over the centuries may have affected the Nile floods, causing periods of droughts or, conversely, devastating floods. The desert sand, constantly encroaching on fertile land and ancient buildings, played the role of a slow but inexorable sink, burying temples and settlements under it. Thus, the traditional view suggests that the oblivion of ancient Egypt was a multifactorial process, where every element, from the conqueror's sword to a grain of sand, gradually erased its former glory, turning a great civilization into a mystery waiting to be rediscovered. This is a story about how even the most monumental creations can succumb to the pressures of time and change. Unconventional hypotheses, whispers from other worlds and hidden knowledge. If traditional explanations sound logical, then why does the mystery of ancient Egypt continue to excite minds? Because for many, they don't give a complete answer. Outside of academic circles, there are much bolder and more fantastic hypotheses that offer an alternative view of the origins and decline of Egyptian greatness. These versions, often dismissed as pseudo-scientific, appeal to hidden knowledge, extraterrestrial influences, or even metaphysical dimensions that may have shaped the fate of this unique civilization. One of the most popular non-traditional theories claims that the Egyptians received their advanced knowledge in architecture, astronomy, medicine, not as a result of thousands of years of development, but through contacts with a highly developed civilization. Who were these teachers? Proponents of this theory often point to extraterrestrial visitors who may have arrived on Earth in ancient times, passing on technology and wisdom far ahead of their time to the Egyptians. The majestic pyramids, which, according to some, could not have been built without the use of levitation or other forces inaccessible to us, are direct evidence of such interference. Mummies that have been perfectly preserved for thousands of years may be the result of unearthly embalming techniques. These gods who descended from heaven could have laid the foundations of Egyptian religion and statehood, leaving behind only instructions that people did not fully understand and eventually completely forgot. Another branch of hypotheses links Egyptian wisdom to a lost antediluvian civilization, possibly the legendary Atlantis, or its analogs. According to this version, Egypt was not just one of the first civilizations, but an heir who preserved fragments of knowledge and technology from a much more developed culture that died in a global cataclysm, for example, the Great Flood. The priests could be the keepers of these ancient secrets, sealing them in secret texts or hidden chambers inaccessible to the uninitiated. That is why, when this line of transmission of knowledge was interrupted, huge layers of wisdom were forever lost to humanity, turning into myths and legends. There are also more mystical or metaphysical explanations. Some suggest that Egyptian society reached such a level of spiritual development and understanding of the universe that most of their knowledge was not material, but energetic or conscious. They may have been able to interact with reality on a level that we can't, using forms of energy or mental abilities that seem like magic to us. And when this level of consciousness was lost, perhaps due to karmic retribution for the misuse of powers, or due to the natural cycle of spiritual decline, this very knowledge became inaccessible, disappearing into the ether. Their technologies were not devices, but abilities of the mind and spirit. And when the connection to this level was lost, so was the understanding of how they achieved their miracles. Finally, there are hypotheses about the deliberate concealment of knowledge. Some researchers suggest that certain groups of priests or secret societies may have deliberately taken key secrets to underground vaults inaccessible to conquerors and the uninitiated. This knowledge could be encrypted in symbols, rituals, or even in architecture itself, waiting for the moment when humanity is ready to rediscover it. This is not a loss, but a conscious conservation designed for the future. All these unconventional hypotheses, no matter how fantastic they may seem, offer fascinating alternatives and fuel an endless search for answers to the question, how could one civilization survive for so long and create such wonders, and then seemingly disappear into the centuries, leaving behind only silent monuments and tantalizing riddles, legends and legends, echoes of forgotten eras and people's fairy tales? In addition to archaeological findings and scientific hypotheses, there is another, much older and perhaps even more truthful source of information about Egypt's past: its own myths, legends, and folk legends. They are not historical documents in the strict sense, but represent a collective memory passed down through millennia, distorted by time and intertwined with symbolism, but nevertheless carrying echoes of those very inhuman influences and lost knowledge. These stories, passed down by word of mouth from generation to generation, contain hints of the true causes of greatness and oblivion. Central to many Egyptian myths is the idea of the time of the first time, Zep Tepi, the golden era when the gods walked the earth and ruled Egypt. These gods were not abstract concepts, but entities that lived among people, taught them agriculture, construction, writing, art, and laws. Osiris, Isis, Horus, all of them are not just mythological characters, but perhaps allegorical images or memories of real mentors who came from an unknown source. Myths describe how they brought civilization, ordered chaos, taught people how to manage the waters of the Nile and build magnificent structures. This concept of the gift of the gods fits perfectly with unconventional hypotheses about external interference, whether it is extraterrestrial beings or survivors of an antediluvian, highly developed civilization. If you believe these legends, then the true foundations of Egyptian wisdom were not invented by man, but received from outside. These same myths often contain allusions to the great catastrophes that preceded or followed these divine epics. References to chaos, universal upheavals, waters covering the earth, and the subsequent rebirth echo global catastrophes, such as the flood, which appears in the mythologies of almost all peoples of the world. The Egyptian traditions that describe how, after the great waters, a primordial hill, Ben, emerges from chaos on which a new creation begins, may not be just a poetic metaphor, but a distorted memory of a real geological or cosmic cataclysm that wiped out previous civilizations, leaving only fragments of knowledge passed on by survivors or those who were not by the gods. It was these alien or superhuman beings who survived the catastrophe that could have become carriers of the technologies and knowledge that formed the basis of Egyptian civilization. Legends also abound with references to secret knowledge and hidden treasures sealed in inaccessible places. Stories of underground labyrinths beneath the Giza Plateau, libraries containing the wisdom of Atlantis, or hidden chambers in the pyramids and the Sphinx all reflect a deep-rooted belief that not all the secrets of Egypt have been lost. Perhaps some of this ancient wisdom was deliberately hidden away by priest initiates who foresaw the coming times of decline and oblivion. They could create time capsules of stone and papyrus to preserve the true knowledge for future generations who would be ready to understand it. This idea resonates with numerous searches for secret passages and rooms that can be found in the city. They are still ongoing. Even the mummification rite itself, which seems to be purely religious, is associated in some traditions not only with a belief in the afterlife, but also with certain scientific or even alchemical processes that were available to the ancients. Were they just a ritual or part of a deeper understanding of physiology and chemistry that we've lost? Legends of breathing mummies or resurrection may be hyperbolized memories of extraordinary medical or even bioengineered knowledge that may have come from non-human sources. Thus, the traditions and legends of ancient Egypt are not just fictions. They are cultural artifacts that carry an echo of a different reality. They fill in the white spots of history, offering explanations for those aspects that do not fit into the generally accepted chronology. They whisper that man was not the sole architect of his greatness, and that the key to understanding Egypt's phenomenal resilience and then its seeming oblivion lies beyond our ordinary understanding of the world. Elusive truth and questions frozen in eternity. So we have gone from monumental grandeur to the smallest artifacts, from strict scientific hypotheses to the most daring fantasies, trying to solve the riddle of the 3,000-year existence of ancient Egypt and the subsequent oblivion of its deepest secrets. We saw how the Nile gave life, how the pharaohs kept order, how engineers built miracles, and priests preserved knowledge. But we also faced an insurmountable wall of silence that shrouded many of their achievements. What really happened? Why did a civilization that could build in such a way that even modern technologies faced difficulties, and its astronomical knowledge was thousands of years ahead of its time, lose access to its own roots? Was it just an inevitable cycle of decline and replacement, as rational voices claim? Or is there more to it than that, something we are not yet ready to accept or even contemplate? Were the gods just a figment of religious imagination? Or were they real entities, aliens from the stars or survivors from another, long-forgotten world, who laid the foundations of Egyptian greatness and then disappeared, taking their secrets with them? Could it be that the true knowledge was too dangerous for mass distribution and was deliberately hidden in caches waiting to happen when humanity reached a new level of awareness? Or perhaps this oblivion was the result of a cosmic or planetary shift that changed not only the landscape, but also the very fabric of reality, making it impossible to understand the old technologies and paradigms? The most intriguing question is the nature of Egypt's very resilience. What allowed it to survive so long when other empires were flaring up and dying out? Was it a unique harmony with nature, an unshakable faith, or an invisible hand of external intervention that sustained him for centuries until it was time for the next stage? Ancient Egypt didn't just leave us ruins. It left us with the most profound puzzle about the nature of civilization, progress, and oblivion. In every shadow of the pyramid, in every silent hieroglyph, in every fragment of an artifact, there may be part of the answer. We can only guess, rethink, and continue to search. For in this eternal search, we are not only discovering the secrets of the past, but also perhaps learning something fundamental about ourselves and our place in the universe. Enigma builders, technologies from a dream set in stone. Let's take a closer look at the very heart of Egyptian grandeur, their monumental architecture, pyramids, temples, obelisks, giant statues. These are not just buildings, but riddles frozen in time, carved out of millions of tons of stone. How were these colossi created, surpassing in scale and precision much of what we can build even today with our advanced mechanization? Official science offers us pictures of thousands of workers exhaustingly dragging multi-ton blocks on primitive ramps, using tools made of copper and stone. This version, of course, sounds logical for academic textbooks and fits comfortably into the generally accepted chronology of human development. But when you stand at the foot of the Great Pyramid of Giza and feel its near mathematical precision, its unprecedented scale, and the startling density of every joint, this image of the industrious but technologically limited ancient Egyptians begins to crumble like desert sand through your fingers. The seams between the huge, perfectly fitted blocks, sometimes weighing tens or even hundreds of tons, are so thin that even a razor blade cannot be inserted between them. This is not a rare exception, but a system precision that repeats over millions of blocks. The granite pillars in the temples, carved and polished to a mirror-like shine, look as if they were processed using high-precision lasers or CNC machines, rather than copper chisels and stone hammers. Where are the traces of this colossal handiwork? Where are the millions of primitive tools that should have been reduced to dust? Where is the logic for achieving such surgical precision without measuring instruments, without electricity, without modern treatment methods? The absence of chips, cracks, and the slightest irregularities on these ancient surfaces, as well as the perfect straightness of multi-kilometer walls and tunnels, make us doubt the official version. This raises a tantalizing question that has been roiling minds for centuries. What if the Egyptians possessed unknown technologies that traditional history stubbornly ignores or fails to explain? Imagine not hundreds of thousands of emaciated slaves, but the use of sound vibrations that can soften the stone at the molecular level, allowing it to be carved like clay or wax, and then harden again with incredible strength. Similar hypotheses about sound scissors or resonators explain the clean cut in the absence of traces of impact processing. Or perhaps they were forms of energy that we only vaguely know about, capable of neutralizing gravity, allowing you to move the 1,000-ton blocks with the ease of a feather through the air, and not on ramps with ropes and logs. Such ideas seem fantastic. They go beyond our ordinary perception, but they are much better explained how it could have been created. The obelisk is a half-wit in Aswan, still lying in a quarry with a perfectly smooth cut, but with a crack, as if something went wrong at the final stage of processing. requiring absolute perfection and not just human error? Or how could the Egyptians raise it to a height of hundreds of meters, granite sarcophagi, or multi-ton ceilings that cannot be moved even by the most powerful modern cranes without huge efforts and special devices? Legends about the magic tools of the gods, about stones that fell into place at the beck of priests, or about singing stones that could move from sounds. These legends cease to be just fairy tales for children and begin to sound like distorted, mythologized memories of technologies that surpassed human understanding at that time. Perhaps the Egyptians did not invent these methods on their own, but inherited them from an ancient, long-vanished civilization that died in prehistoric times, leaving only fragments of their knowledge in the form of ruins and artifacts. Or even more radically, they received them from extraterrestrial teachers who visited Earth in the distant past, passing on the basics of civilization and technology to humanity. This knowledge may have been so alien to their own level of development that the Egyptians perceived it as divine intervention or magic without fully understanding its scientific basis. That is why they were not able to fully pass them on to the next generations, when contacts ceased or the carriers of knowledge disappeared. And here lies one of the greatest mysteries. We see the result, monuments that defy logic, but we don't see the process of creating them. And this silence of stone still holds secrets that we desperately try to decipher, year after year wondering about the true source of the Egyptian engineering genius. The cult of the dead and the mystery of eternal life, beyond the earthly limits. One of the most striking, pervasive, and sometimes eerie features of ancient Egypt to modern humans was their cult of the dead, which is inextricably linked to the idea of eternal life and an afterlife. This was not just a belief in the continuation of existence, but a carefully designed, multi-stage system that determined the entire life of an Egyptian, from his birth to his last breath. The purpose of this cult was not just a decent burial, but to ensure immortality for the soul, its various aspects, Ka, life force, and Ba, personality, soul, which after death left the body, but could return to it. It was for this preservation of the vessel that mummification was intended. Mummification, the standard practice of embalming, has been brought to perfection, bordering on art and science. Removing the internal organs through small incisions, carefully treating the body with natron for dehydration, filling the cavities with incense, wrapping hundreds of meters of carefully soaked linen bandages. All this took up to 70 days and was an incredibly complex, time-consuming, and expensive process that is not accessible to everyone. But why such a huge emphasis on preserving the physical body in its integrity if the soul, according to their own beliefs, was immortal and could move? If it was just a matter of faith, then why was it so fundamental and all-consuming that it defined not only funeral rites, but also architecture, tombs and pyramids, art, agricultural cycles, and even public policy? Why did the pharaohs and their subjects spend so much resources, time, and effort preparing for the afterlife if it was only a metaphysical journey? Perhaps there was much more to this cult than just a religious belief or superstition. Some researchers, especially those who support unconventional theories, suggest that the Egyptians had secret knowledge about the nature of consciousness, energy, and even the possibility of transferring or preserving the soul, far beyond our current understanding of biology and physics. Mummification, in this view, could be not just a ritual, but part of a complex technology aimed at creating an ideal vessel for the soul, which could function in other dimensions, after awakening in thousands of years, or for reincarnation in a new, more perfect body. There are versions that the priests who kept this deepest knowledge possessed secrets that allowed them to manipulate biological matter at the cellular or even atomic level, use energy fields for conservation, or even somehow transfer consciousness to a specially prepared body. This wasn't just preserving the mortal body, it was an attempt to cheat death in the literal sense, using principles derived from a source that had a deeper understanding of life, death, and the nature of existence. Consider the Book of the Dead, not just a collection of magical spells, but a detailed, almost technical guide to the transition of the soul to the afterlife, full of complex instructions, passwords for passing various gates, maps of heavenly paths and warnings. Could this map be not just a poetic metaphor, but a reflection of the real journey of consciousness in the subtle worlds, or even some kind of interdimensional navigation. If the Egyptians believed that their gods came from the stars or from other dimensions, then perhaps they knew that after death, people also go on their own cosmic or metaphysical path. The cult of the dead, from this point of view, was not a dark obsession with non-existence, but a grandiose scientific experiment disguised as a religion, designed to ensure immortality, or at least the continuation of existence in a form that we cannot yet comprehend. The disappearance of this knowledge of eternal life and its transformation into superstitions incomprehensible to later generations may have been one of the reasons why Egypt, having achieved such greatness and understanding, eventually lost its way, forgetting how its own mechanism of immortality worked and leaving us only a shell of the majestic, but an obscure cult. Celestial teachers and lost star charts. Astronomy beyond the eye. The ancient Egyptians seemed to have a knowledge of the cosmos that went far beyond what could be comprehended with the naked eye or primitive tools. Their temples and pyramids were often oriented around the solstices and equinoxes with incredible, almost modern precision. The ceilings of tombs and temples are decorated with star maps depicting constellations, planets and their movements, some of which seem too complex and detailed for a culture that is generally believed to have been at the dawn of astronomical observation. How could they know about the precession of the equinoxes, a phenomenon that causes a slow change in the position of the spring and autumn equinoxes on the celestial sphere, and takes a cycle of 25,120 years if their tools were so simple? This knowledge requires not just centuries of observation, but continuous recording of data over millennia, which seems unlikely in an unstable world. This suggests that their astronomical knowledge was obtained from outside, from sources that had a deeper, perhaps cosmic understanding of the structure of the universe. Legends about gods who came from the stars, for example, Osiris, associated with the constellation Orion, or Sopdet, associated with Sirius, take on a literal meaning. Could these heavenly teachers convey to the Egyptians not only general information about the stars, but also accurate data about the movement of celestial bodies, maps that are now lost or hidden? Perhaps the famous Zodiac of Dendera, which is a strikingly accurate map of the starry sky, was not created during the period of Roman rule, as historians claim, but is a copy or interpretation of a much older original dating back to the Golden Age of Egypt. If this is the case, it means that their understanding of the cosmos was not the result of thousands of years of observations from Earth, but direct knowledge obtained from a heavenly perspective. The disappearance of this advanced astronomical knowledge also raises questions. Why, if the Egyptians were such skilled observers and cartographers of the heavens, was this knowledge not passed on in full? Perhaps it was esoteric, accessible only to a narrow circle of initiated priests who perceived it as a sacred secret and not as scientific information. Or when the celestial teachers left Earth, their students, left without direct guidance, gradually lost full understanding of the most complex astronomical concepts, reducing them to rituals and symbols. These lost star charts, if they existed, could be not just tools for navigating the sky, but also key to understanding the origins of Egyptian civilization, its relationship to cosmic cycles, and perhaps even its ultimate fate. Looking up at the starry sky above the pyramids today, one can't help but feel that the ancient Egyptians saw more than just twinkling lights there, and this vision may have been bestowed upon them from the depths of space. Sunken temples and hidden rivers, a watery gateway to the forgotten past. In addition to the majestic structures that rise above the desert sands, there are other, less accessible, but equally intriguing evidence of potentially inhuman intervention or forgotten civilizations, underwater ruins and sunken cities. These stone structures, resting at the bottom of the oceans and seas like time capsules sealed by the water column, contain traces of a grandiose past that may have been shaped by events and forces beyond ordinary human experience. Their age, location, and scale challenge not only our understanding of ancient technology, but also the very chronology of civilization on Earth. Imagine Yonaguni off the coast of Japan, a giant, perfectly crafted stepped monument discovered at a depth of. Its rectangular shapes, right angles, and terraces seem too regular to be a work of nature. But its age dates back to the end of the last ice age, when sea levels were significantly lower, about 10 to 12,000 years ago. This means that if it is a man-made structure, then it is millennia older than any developed civilization known to us. Such finds like the sunken city of Cambay Bay off the west coast of India, where sonar revealed structures resembling streets and buildings, and carbon analysis of wooden artifacts dated them to the age of 7,500–9,500 years BC, make us rethink the entire paradigm of human development. In these epochs, according to official data, man was still a primitive hunter-gatherer and not a builder of complex cities. Perhaps these sunken cities were the settlements of a non-human race that developed on Earth long before the appearance of man in the modern form, or a civilization that reached its peak under the direct influence of extraterrestrial intelligence. Their disappearance is probably due to the catastrophic sea level rise after the Ice Age, but their very existence with such advanced structures in such a distant past is irrefutable proof of the existence of lost epochs that have been erased from our memory. The waters of the ocean may hide not just ruins, but entire continents that sank as a result of global cataclysms that could have been caused by cosmic events, the fall of meteorites, pole shifts, or other unearthly influences, which in turn could have triggered the legendary Great Flood. For Egypt, whose life was inextricably linked with the Nile, the idea of sunken worlds has a special meaning. Could some of their knowledge about the afterlife and space travel be related to the memory of such cataclysms? The need to go underwater or ascend into the sky? In the depths of their own mythology, there may be hints that the Earth went through cycles of prosperity and decline, where water played the role of both creator and destroyer. These underwater ruins are not just archaeological finds, they are silent evidence of grandiose but forgotten eras in which life completely different from our own might have flourished, or where humanity evolved under the guidance of other non-human beings. They make us wonder, what if a significant part of our planet's history is hidden under the waters of the oceans, waiting to be discovered, and these water gates lead not only to sunken cities, but also to the truth about our own, perhaps unearthly origins? Pharaoh's gold and the economy of the afterlife, unfathomable wealth. Ancient Egypt was not just a civilization with amazing knowledge, but also an empire of untold riches. Gold, symbolizing the flesh of the gods, flowed like a river from the Nubian mines, filling the treasures of the pharaohs and giving unprecedented grandeur to their temples and tombs. But how could such an economy, seemingly based on simple agriculture and mining, support such grandiose projects for thousands of years? Pyramids, temples, obelisks, statues. Each of these monuments required not only enormous human resources and engineering knowledge, but also an unimaginable amount of material resources. The construction of the Karnak Temple alone took almost 2,000 years, absorbing resources that would have bankrupted any modern country. Where did such stable and inexhaustible sources of funding come from? Official history attributes this to an effective system of centralized administration, taxation, and slave labor. However, even with the maximum mobilization of resources and the availability of cheap labor, the scale of projects and the amount of precious materials used seem incommensurable with the known economic opportunities of that era. We are not just talking about gold jewelry, but tons of pure gold used to decorate tombs, statues, and sarcophagi, such as Tutankhamun. Where did all that gold go after the fall of Egypt? Why are its traces lost in the centuries, leaving only isolated finds? If this wealth had been plundered, as is commonly believed, then traces of it would have surfaced in the economies of other empires. But this did not happen on this scale. Perhaps the economy of ancient Egypt had deeper, even mystical roots. Some unconventional theories suggest that the Egyptians may have had secret knowledge about mining or even creating precious metals that is not available to us. Ideas about alchemy, about manipulating elements that sound like science fiction to us, may have been part of their lost technology. Or more intriguingly, their economic power was supported not just by land resources, but by external support. The same heavenly teachers who could supply rare materials or technologies that make it possible to extract and process gold more efficiently. After all, if there was a resource that could endlessly replenish the treasury, this would explain the phenomenal longevity and stability of their economic system, which, unlike many others, did not collapse under the weight of giant projects. This concept goes beyond simple accounting. It suggests that the economy of ancient Egypt was not just an economic system, but part of a grand plan, where wealth served not only earthly purposes, but also provided the economy of the afterlife as they understood it. It was a system where resources were channeled to ensure the immortality of the pharaohs and the well-being of the eternal journey, which may have been a much more complex and costly process than we can imagine. The loss of these secret sources of wealth or methods of using them, along with the disappearance of heavenly patrons, may have been one of the fundamental causes of Egypt's slow but inexorable decline from a wealthy power to a weakened province. Guardian priests, the cipher of knowledge and deliberate concealment. The heart and brain of ancient Egypt was certainly the priesthood. They were not just religious leaders, but also custodians of knowledge. Astronomical, medical, engineering, mathematical, and of course, sacred. In their hands were the keys to hieroglyphic writing, to the most complex rituals, to chronicles and maps. They were the intellectual elite, the link between the pharaoh and the gods, and between the past and the future. Their influence extended to all spheres of life, from everyday life to grandiose state projects. But it is with their disappearance or loss of influence that most of the mysteries of ancient Egypt seem to be connected. When the foreign invaders came to Egypt, they didn't just defeat the army, they destroyed the centuries-old system of priestly power. Temples were closed, property was confiscated, and the priests themselves were persecuted or lost their status. In such circumstances, a logical question arises. Was the knowledge simply lost because there was no one to pass it on to, or was it deliberately hidden? Some researchers suggest that the most sacred and possibly dangerous knowledge was not available to the general public or even to most priests. They were kept in the strictest secrecy, passed on only to a select few, a narrow circle of initiates who could form a kind of secret society. Perhaps these dedicated priests, anticipating the inevitable decline of their civilization and the arrival of foreign rulers, decided to encode and hide the most valuable secrets so that they would not fall into the wrong hands or be used for harm. This knowledge could be sealed not only in the legendary underground vaults, but also in symbols, architectural proportions, and mathematical relationships, and mythological narratives. The hieroglyphs themselves could be a multi-layered cipher where the literal meaning concealed deeper, metaphysical, or even technological instructions. That is why the Rosetta Stone, which allowed us to decipher language, revealed only the surface layer of meaning, leaving the true depths of understanding inaccessible to us. Legends such as the story of the Hall of Records under the Sphinx, or of secret libraries leading to other dimensions, may be not just fictions, but echoes of real attempts by priests to preserve and transmit knowledge through the millennia, waiting for the moment when humanity will be sufficiently developed to understand them again. These encrypted messages are waiting patiently for their discovery, like time capsules left for distant descendants. Thus, the oblivion of Egyptian wisdom may not be a passive process of decline, but an active act of preservation, a strategic maneuver of those who believed that not all knowledge is meant for every time and every nation. And today we may be on the verge of breaking them, if only we can find the right key to the cipher left to us by the guardian priests, the phenomenon of a moon, energy or spiritual power. In the pantheon of Egyptian gods, Amun, whose name means hidden or invisible, has played a special, ever-growing role for thousands of years. Originally a local deity of Thebes, Amun gradually merged with the sun god Ra, becoming the all-powerful Amun-Ra, the king of the gods and the source of all life. This transition from regional cult to all-encompassing power is a mystery in itself. Why did Amun, the hidden one, become the most revered and influential? Was this simply the result of the political ambitions of the Theban pharaohs? Or was there something deeper behind it, something related to the very nature of his secrecy? Some unconventional interpretations suggest that Amun was not just a god in the religious sense, but a symbol or even a personification of some universal, intangible energy or force that permeates all things. Perhaps the priests of Amun had knowledge of how to use or channel this hidden energy. It could be a life force like prana in Indian teachings or chai in Chinese philosophy, which they were able to accumulate and use for various purposes, whether it was healing, influencing consciousness, or even manipulating physical reality. If Amun-Ra was indeed a source of invisible energy, then its temples, such as the colossal Karnak complex, could have been not just places of worship, but giant power stations or centers of concentration of this power. Their architectural designs, relative positions of celestial bodies, and even their internal geometry could be tuned to resonate with certain cosmic or terrestrial frequencies in order to collect and channel this hidden energy as efficiently as possible. The disappearance of the cult of Amun-Ra, or rather its dissolution into other religions, also raises questions. Was this due to the fact that the knowledge about this hidden energy was lost or deliberately destroyed? Or did this energy itself cease to be available to humanity as planetary or cosmic conditions change? Perhaps Pharaoh Akhenaten's attempts to introduce a monotheistic cult of Aten, the god of the sun disk, were an attempt to replace or reinterpret this hidden energy with something more tangible and understandable. But this reform failed because it did not take into account the true nature of what Amun was. Thus, the cult of Amun-Ra may be not just a religious doctrine, but a coded message about ancient energy principles that were once known to Egyptian priests. And today we may be on the verge of rediscovering them, if only we can understand that the hidden Amun was not just a god, but the key to understanding the invisible forces that shaped the greatness of ancient Egypt. Sacred geometry and cosmic proportions, architecture as a message. When we look at the majestic structures of ancient Egypt, such as pyramids, temples, and obelisks, their monumentality is no less striking than their mathematical accuracy and geometric harmony. These are not just piles of rocks, they are messages encoded in matter, whispering about the deepest understanding of the universe. Why, for example, is the Great Pyramid of Giza so precisely oriented to the cardinal directions? Its edges point to true north with a striking margin of error of just 3 minutes of arc, which is superior to many modern methods. Why do its proportions, according to some researchers, reflect the number pi, the golden ratio, phi, and even the ratios associated with the circumference of the Earth and the distance to the Sun? Could this have been an accident, or was it a deliberate incorporation of universal cosmic principles into their architecture? Traditional science attributes this accuracy to thousands of years of observations and the use of simple tools such as plumb lines and measuring cords. However, if this is the case, why wasn't this mathematical and astronomical refinement explicitly recorded in their texts and blueprints? Why is there no direct description of how they performed such complex calculations and transferred them to giant construction sites? This suggests that their knowledge of sacred geometry was not just empirical, but intuitive, or derived from a source that had the deepest understanding of cosmic laws. Perhaps they saw the universe as a giant mathematical equation, and their structures were an attempt to replicate this divine order on Earth. Some unconventional theories suggest that these proportions and orientations may have been part of the cosmic language, a universal system of knowledge passed on to the Egyptians by extraterrestrial civilizations. If these gods came from the stars, then it is logical to assume that they brought with them an understanding of cosmic proportions and harmony. In this case, pyramids and temples were not just tombs or places of worship, but functional devices tuned to resonate with certain energies or even communication centers that could transmit information over long distances. Their perfect geometry could serve not only for aesthetics, but also for the accumulation, transformation, or transmission of invisible energy. The loss of understanding of this sacred geometry, its transformation into purely aesthetic or symbolic forms, may have been one of the reasons why the Egyptians eventually stopped building pyramids of such scale and accuracy. They have lost the key to the true meaning of their own architecture, turning from space-scale engineers to just builders of grandiose, but not so functional structures. Alchemy of the soul and the elixir of immortality, the lost secrets of Hermeticism. In addition to its grandiose buildings and cults, ancient Egypt was also the cradle of the Hermetic tradition, an esoteric teaching attributed to the legendary sage Hermes Trismegistus, identified with the Egyptian god Thoth. This teaching, set forth in the so-called Hermetic corpus, encompassed a wide range of knowledge, from astrology and alchemy to magic and philosophy. Although most of the surviving texts date back to the Hellenistic period, many researchers believe that their roots go back to the deep antiquity of the Egyptian civilization. What if this Hermetic knowledge was not just philosophical speculation, but practical methods that could transform both matter and human consciousness? The idea of alchemy, as it was understood by the ancients, was much broader than just turning lead into gold. It was the science of transformation, both physical and spiritual. Could the Egyptian priests have possessed the secrets of creating the philosopher's stone, not only as a substance capable of transforming metals, but also as an elixir of immortality or a tool for achieving enlightenment? If they knew how to manipulate elements at a basic level, it would explain not only their wealth in gold, but also their amazing achievements in embalming and preserving bodies. Perhaps mummification was not just a physical process, but part of an alchemical ritual designed to prepare the body for the soul's return or ascension to higher dimensions. The loss of this Hermetic knowledge is one of the greatest tragedies for humanity. As the priestly schools declined and Greek and Roman cultures gradually replaced the ancient traditions, these esoteric teachings were either deliberately hidden from the uninitiated or simply became incomprehensible to the new generation. Some of them were transmitted through the Library of Alexandria, but most of them probably disappeared in time or were destroyed. It is in this loss that perhaps lies the answer to the question of why such a powerful civilization could not preserve its most intimate secrets. They were too deep, too ethereal to be understood and preserved by those who had lost touch with their true source. Thus, Hermeticism may not just be a forgotten philosophy, but a key to understanding the soul technology that the ancient Egyptians possessed. This suggests that their quest for immortality was not just a belief, but a practical goal achieved through alchemical and spiritual practices that are now inaccessible to us. And in the silence of the tombs and ruins, perhaps, the echo of this lost knowledge still rings, waiting for someone who can decipher the language of stars, stones, and souls again. The phenomenon and the energy of sound, vibrations that built worlds and whispered secrets. Among the innumerable mysteries that shroud ancient Egypt, one of the least studied, but most intriguing, is related to their seemingly deep and not fully understood understanding of sound and vibration. While modern science rarely associates Egyptians with cutting-edge acoustic technology, a close examination of some artifacts, archaeological finds, and even architecture itself hints at much more than just a random combination of circumstances or empirical observations. Many ancient temples, pyramid halls, burial chambers, and even sarcophagi have amazing and sometimes inexplicable acoustic properties. In certain rooms, the sound of the voice can be amplified to incredible limits, creating powerful resonances that seem to penetrate stone or generate low-frequency vibrations that are physically felt, as if the ground is shaking under your feet. Was it the result of pure chance, an amazing coincidence of shape and material? Or was it a deliberate, carefully thought-out architectural decision based on a deep knowledge of the principles of acoustics, harmonics, and resonance? Legends of singing stones that are said to play music or make sounds when touched, as well as myths about how priests made stones levitate or fall into place by using certain sounds or chants, may not just be fairy tales or figments of the imagination. Perhaps these are just distorted, mythologized memories of once existing but lost sound technologies, which for contemporaries seem nothing but magic. In Eastern spiritual traditions, such as Hinduism and Buddhism, the sound Om or Aum is considered the primordial vibration of the universe, the source of all things, the fundamental sound of creation. Although there is no direct phonetic counterpart to Om in the Egyptian pantheon, the very concept of Amun, the hidden, invisible, but omnipotent God whose breath was believed to animate all things, may indicate a surprisingly similar understanding. What if Amun was not just a god in the traditional religious sense, but a symbol, a personification, or even a direct embodiment of some universal, intangible energy or vibration that permeates the entire cosmos and can be used to transform reality? Perhaps the priests of Amun, with their deep esoteric knowledge, not only understood, but also knew how to use or channel this hidden energy, this all-pervading vibration. It could be a life force like prana in Indian teachings, chai in Chinese philosophy, or vrel in theosophical concepts, which they were able to accumulate, concentrate, and use for various purposes. These goals could range from treating diseases and influencing consciousness to more ambitious tasks, such as manipulating physical reality on a fundamental level. If Amun-Ra was indeed the source or key to this invisible but powerful energy, then its temples, such as the colossal Karnak complex with its huge halls, giant columns, and intricate underground passages, might not just be places of worship. They could function as giant power stations, acoustic resonators, or centers of concentration of this force. Their architectural designs, their precise positioning relative to the celestial bodies, their particular materials, their internal geometry, and even the shape of their columns and statues could be carefully tuned to resonate with specific cosmic or terrestrial frequencies in order to collect, focus, and channel this hidden energy as efficiently as possible. Perhaps the creation of these monumental structures was a process where rough physical labor was combined with the use of sound fields to levitate and precisely fit blocks, which would explain the lack of visible traces of primitive tools in the phenomenal precision of granite processing. The loss of these sound and vibration technologies could be one of the most fatal blows to Egyptian civilization. If the secret of their monumental construction, their ability to process stone with surgical precision and move multi-ton blocks was to manipulate these invisible vibrations, then the loss of this knowledge may have led to the fact that subsequent generations could no longer repeat the grandiose projects of their ancestors. This knowledge could be so esoteric, requiring such a subtle understanding and such a deep harmony with the cosmic vibrations, that it could not simply be written down in ordinary texts or transmitted to the uninitiated. It required a special state of consciousness, long-term training, and deep spiritual practice, which was available only to selected priest initiates. The disappearance of this caste, or the loss of this subtle connection with the rhythm of the universe, may have been one of the reasons why Egypt, having reached its unthinkable peak, gradually sank into oblivion, leaving behind only silent monuments. These temples and tombs still stand, holding mysteries, vibrating at unseen frequencies, waiting for someone to retune in to their ancient rhythm and hear the whisper of a stone that may once have sung. In this silence lies the key to understanding how one civilization could survive for 3,000 years, drawing power from an invisible source. If the idea of the influence of sound and vibration on matter in ancient Egypt seems intriguing, the following aspects deepen this mystery. There is evidence that many Egyptian structures may have functioned as giant resonance chambers or even sophisticated acoustic instrument capable of generating or focusing specific sound frequencies. This goes beyond a simple echo and hints at the deliberate use of architecture to create controlled sound fields that can have a physical and psycho-emotional impact. Consider, for example, the underground chambers under the pyramids, such as the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. It is known that in these rooms, the sound of certain frequencies can cause a powerful resonance felt by the whole body. This is not just an accident. Their size, shape, and even the material they are built from, granite, which has certain acoustic properties, could have been calculated with amazing accuracy to create such effects. The same applies to some temples, where certain sounds cause strong vibrations of the walls or floor. Could these resonance chambers be used for healing, through vibrational cell massage, for changing the state of consciousness, for meditation or prophecy, or even for physical manipulation of objects? Even more intriguing are the acoustic artifacts. Some researchers point to the presence in temples and tombs of strange sound wells or resonators carved in stone, which when struck emit unusually clear and long-sounding notes, or the mysterious sound stones found in some places that produce melodic sounds when tapped. These artifacts, which we now think of simply as stone musical instruments, could have been components of a more sophisticated acoustic technology. The priests may have mastered the art of sound coding, using specific sequences of notes, rhythms, and vibrations to activate hidden functions of temples or to influence energy fields. The idea that the Egyptians could have used infrasound, a sound below the human hearing threshold, but capable of producing physical and psychological effects, or ultrasound, used today for cleaning, welding, and even levitation in the laboratory, seems fanciful, but it offers an elegant explanation for many of their unexplained achievements. Infrasound could be used to create the effect of fear or awe in temples, and ultrasound could be used to accurately cut stone or levitate it. The loss of these resonant and acoustic technologies has caused their grandiose structures to stop singing or vibrating, turning into silent ruins. The priests who had once been able to play the temples like giant musical instruments disappeared, and their knowledge of the cosmic symphony was lost. And today, standing in the silence of ancient temples, we may be missing the most important part of their message, the sound harmony that once animated these stones and made Egypt a bridge between the material and non-material worlds. If the idea of the influence of sound and vibration on matter in ancient Egypt seems intriguing, the following aspects deepen this mystery. There is evidence that many Egyptian structures may have functioned as giant resonance chambers or even sophisticated acoustic instruments capable of generating or focusing specific sound frequencies. This goes beyond a simple echo and hints at the deliberate use of architecture to create controlled sound fields that can have a physical and psycho-emotional impact. Consider, for example, the underground chambers under the pyramids, such as the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. It is known that in these rooms, the sound of certain frequencies can cause a powerful resonance felt by the whole body. This is not just an accident. Their size, shape, and even the material they are built from, granite, which has certain acoustic properties, could have been calculated with amazing accuracy to create such effects. The same applies to some temples, where certain sounds cause strong vibrations of the walls or floor. Could these resonance chambers be used for healing, through vibrational cell massage, for altering states of consciousness, for meditation or prophecy, or even for physical manipulation with objects? Even more intriguing are the acoustic artifacts. Some researchers point to the presence in temples and tombs of strange sound wells or resonators carved in stone, which when struck emit unusually clear and long-sounding notes. Or the mysterious sound stones, found in some places that produce melodic sounds when tapped. These artifacts, which we now think of simply as stone musical instruments, could have been components of a more sophisticated acoustic technology. The priests may have mastered the art of sound coding, using specific sequences of notes, rhythms, and vibrations to activate hidden functions of temples or to influence energy fields. The idea that the Egyptians could have used infrasound, a sound below the human hearing threshold but capable of producing physical and psychological effects, or ultrasound, used today for cleaning, welding, and even levitation in the laboratory, seems fanciful, but it offers an elegant explanation for many of their unexplained achievements. Infrasound could be used to create the effect of fear or awe in temples, and ultrasound could be used to accurately cut stone or levitate it. The loss of these resonant and acoustic technologies has caused their grandiose structures to stop singing or vibrating, turning into silent ruins. The priests who had once been able to play the temples like giant musical instruments disappeared, and their knowledge of the cosmic symphony was lost. And today, standing in the silence of ancient temples, we may be missing the most important part of their message, the sound harmony that once animated these stones and made Egypt a bridge between the material and non-material worlds. Curse of the pharaohs and energy defenses, mystical barriers that guard eternity and warn the uninitiated. The legends of the curse of the pharaohs that envelop every open tomb, especially after the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, are one of the most eerie and intriguing aspects of ancient Egyptian mysteries. The deaths and misfortunes that befell the members of the Howard Carter expedition gave rise to a wave of rumors and beliefs that the pharaohs left behind invisible but deadly defenses. Rational explanations, such as mold, bacteria, or gases accumulated in enclosed spaces, do not always fully satisfy the thirst for mystery. Were these really just natural causes, or were these curses hiding a more complex, even energetic or psychic form of protection created by the ancient priests? Perhaps the Egyptians, with their deep knowledge of consciousness and energies, knew how to create mental traps or energy shields around their tombs. These defenses may have been based on principles that we are only beginning to explore today in the fields of psychokinesis, telepathy, or the effect of intent on matter. Imagine the invisible barriers made up of the concentrated will of priests and pharaohs who were supposed to protect the peace of the dead and their untold treasures from desecration. These curses could be not just superstitious threats, but systems that use certain frequencies or mental programs that can cause illness, accidents, or even insanity in those who violate the sacred peace. Mummies, which were supposed to serve as guides for the soul to the afterlife, could also be accumulators of this protective energy, enhancing its effect. Secrets of these energy defenses, they may have been part of the lost knowledge of the priests that we discussed earlier. Perhaps they knew how to use the geometry of tombs, certain minerals, or even special sound vibrations to create such curses. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, with its sudden deaths and strange coincidences, could be a prime example of how such an ancient but powerful system works. It didn't kill instantly, but gradually drained one's life force or caused fatal coincidences, making it even more sinister. Thus, the curse of the pharaohs can be not just a fiction or a chain of coincidences, but proof of the existence of subtle but powerful technologies for influencing reality available to the ancient Egyptians. This knowledge, if it really existed, goes beyond our materialistic science and hints that the line between the physical and the metaphysical was much thinner for the Nile people. And these invisible barriers created by the priests still whisper that, even after death, the pharaohs could continue to protect their secrets, not allowing the uninitiated to access them. The legends of the curse of the pharaohs that shroud every open tomb, and especially flared up after the discovery of the untouched tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922, are one of the most eerie but also incredibly intriguing aspects of ancient Egyptian mysteries. After the opening of the tomb by Lord Carnarvon, the sponsor of the Howard Carter expedition, and a series of mysterious deaths and misfortunes that befell the expedition members and their families, a wave of rumors and beliefs swept the world that the pharaohs left behind invisible but deadly defenses. Rational explanations such as mold, fungal spores, ancient bacteria, or toxic gases accumulated in enclosed spaces are certainly offered by scientists, but they do not always fully satisfy the deep human thirst for mystery and mysticism. Were these really just natural causes, or were these curses hiding a more complex, even energetic, psychic, or mental form of protection created by the ancient priests to protect the peace of their lords? Perhaps the Egyptians, with their deep and lost knowledge of the nature of consciousness, subtle energies, and metaphysical interactions, knew how to create not just physical traps, but also mental or energy shields around their tombs and sacred sites. These defenses may have been based on principles that we are only beginning to explore today in quantum physics, psychokinesis, telepathy, or the effects of human intent on matter and energy fields. Imagine invisible barriers woven from the concentrated will of the priests, the astral power of the pharaoh himself, and perhaps even using certain minerals or artifacts charged with special energy. These barriers were supposed to protect the peace of the dead and their untold treasures from desecration and encroachment. These curses could be not just superstitious threats carved on walls, but complex systems that use specific frequencies, vibrations, or even pre-programmed mental constructs that can cause not just physical harm, but also long-term illnesses, a series of accidents, psychological disorders, or even insanity in those who violate the sacred peace. Mummies, which were supposed to serve not only as guides for the soul to the afterlife, but also as anchors for the return of the spirit, could also be accumulators of this protective energy, enhancing its effect and projecting it outwards. The secrets of these energy defenses may have been part of the very lost knowledge of the priests that we discussed earlier. Those esoteric teachings that were passed on only to a select few and were too powerful for widespread dissemination. Perhaps they knew how to use the geometry of tombs, the location of stones, certain minerals, or even special sound vibrations to create such curses that were activated when an intruder entered. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, with its sudden and unexplained deaths, such as from blood poisoning, pneumonia, or even suicide, as well as strange coincidences, such as the sudden death of Carter's bird from a cobra on the day of the tomb's opening, could be a prime example of how such an ancient but powerful defense system works. It did not kill instantly and ostentatiously, but gradually drained the vital forces, caused fatal accidents, or disturbed the mental balance, which makes it even more sinister and difficult to explain from the standpoint of ordinary science. Thus, the curse of the pharaohs may not be just a fiction, the fruit of superstition or a chain of random coincidences. It may well serve as an indirect but convincing proof of the existence of subtle but powerful technologies for influencing reality available to the ancient Egyptians. This knowledge, if it really existed, goes beyond our materialistic science and suggests that the line between the physical and the metaphysical, between the material and the energetic, was much more subtle and insightful for the Nile people than for us. And these invisible barriers created by the priests still whisper that even after death, the pharaohs could continue to protect their secrets, not allowing the uninitiated to access them, and that the great secrets of Egypt could be deliberately protected from the outside world, condemning them to oblivion, waiting for someone who can decipher not only the secrets of Egypt, but also the secrets of Egypt, hieroglyphs, but also energy messages, water magic in sunken worlds, the Nile as a cosmic artery. For the ancient Egyptians, the Nile was not just a river, it was a cosmic artery, a living deity, the heart and soul of their civilization. Its annual floods, which produced fertile silt, were not just a natural phenomenon, but an act of creation, a divine blessing that ensured life and prosperity in the vast desert. The Egyptians built their lives around this river, but their understanding of water may have gone far beyond agriculture and navigation. There are hints of water magic or hydrotechnology that we still don't understand. For example, how did the complex system of underground channels and water reservoirs found in some temples function, which seem to be used not only for water supply but also for ritual or even energy purposes? Could the Egyptians have controlled water flows not only through dams and canals, but also by using certain energy principles that affect the properties of water? According to unconventional hypotheses, the ancient Egyptians may have had knowledge of living water or structured water that could be used not only for drinking, but also for healing, purification, or even as a conductor of energy. Perhaps their ritual ablutions and sacred lakes and temples were part of this knowledge, aimed at harmonizing the body and spirit with the water elements. The idea that water can store information or be a carrier of energy is becoming increasingly relevant in modern science, but the Egyptians may have known about it millennia ago. What if the Nile was not just a river for them, but part of a global water network that connected them to other ancient civilizations, or even to underwater worlds that we are just beginning to guess exist? Legends of sunken cities such as Heracleon and Canopus, discovered off the coast of Egypt, confirm that part of their history went underwater. But were these cities simply swallowed up by the sea, or were they part of a deeper, hydrographic infrastructure that had metaphysical significance? Imagine that the Nile, with its predictable floods, was not just a source of life, but also a clock indicating cosmic cycles, or even an energy conduit through which gods or other entities could interact with the earthly world. Its waters could be not only a symbol of fertility, but also a channel for receiving information or energy from hidden sources. The loss of this deep understanding of the Nile, its transformation from a sacred cosmic artery to an ordinary river, may have coincided with the decline of Egyptian civilization. When the knowledge of water magic was lost, when the connection to this cosmic artery weakened, Egypt may have lost not only its economic stability, but also its spiritual foundation, gradually fading away like a flower deprived of life-giving moisture. It makes us think, Isn't the Nile hiding in its depths not only archaeological treasures, but also keys to a completely different understanding of water, its role in the life of civilizations, and its connection with cosmic forces that we have long forgotten? Deliberate oblivion and cycles of consciousness. Why was the truth hidden? We talked a lot about how the secrets of ancient Egypt were lost. External invasions, changing religions, natural disasters. But what if some of this oblivion wasn't accidental, but deliberate? What if the priests and keepers of knowledge, aware of the cyclical nature of history and the inevitability of decline, deliberately hid the deepest secrets, removing them from public access so that they would not be desecrated, destroyed, or used for evil in unenlightened times? This hypothesis suggests that Egypt's decline was not simply the result of external factors, but part of a grand millennial plan to preserve the most valuable wisdom for future generations who will be ready to accept it. In this context, forgetting becomes an act of preservation. Secret societies, esoteric schools, and fraternities that are believed to have drawn their knowledge from Egyptian sources, such as the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, may have been threads that stretched across the centuries to preserve fragments of this lost wisdom. Hieroglyphs could be not just a language, but a multi-level cipher where each symbol had several meanings: literal, ritual, alchemical, and possibly cosmic. Opening the Rosetta Stone allowed us to understand only the surface layer, leaving the true depths of meaning inaccessible. The symbolism of Egyptian gods and myths may also have been an allegorical language that concealed not only religious doctrines, but also scientific principles, philosophical concepts, and even instructions for using lost technologies. This idea of cycles of consciousness, periods of rise and fall, enlightenment and oblivion, may also have been fundamental to the Egyptians. They may have believed that humanity was going through its own golden ages and dark ages, and that in the dark ages, certain knowledge must be hidden so as not to cause harm or be completely forgotten. Their own longevity may have been the result of a deep understanding of these cycles and the ability to adapt to them, preserving their essence even under external pressure. Then the disappearance of their greatness was not the final end, but only the transition to a hidden state, waiting for a new first time when the truth can come to light again. Thus, the deepest mystery of ancient Egypt may lie not in the fact that it disappeared, but in why and how it decided to disappear from the visible world. Was it a deliberate reduction of their presence in order to keep their most sacred secrets from the uninitiated? Or was it the anticipated end of the cycle, followed by a new awakening? We see only fragments of former greatness, but the true message may still be waiting to be fully revealed, encoded in stone, myth, and the very fabric of time. And in this search, we are faced with the question, are we ready for a truth that can destroy all our ideas about the past and the future, about the development of civilization, and about our own place in the infinite cycle of being, the role of women and goddesses, the forgotten power of the Egyptian matriarchy, and the connection to the cosmos? While male figures such as pharaohs and priests dominate the historical record, ancient Egypt stands out among ancient civilizations for the surprising and often underestimated role of women. Here, women enjoyed unprecedented rights and freedoms for their time. They could own property, inherit land, enter into contracts, conduct court cases, and even hold high government and religious positions. Some of them became regents and sometimes full-fledged pharaohs, like Hatshepsut, one of the most successful rulers whose reign was marked by peace and prosperity. This degree of emancipation and influence is strikingly different from that of women in other patriarchal societies of the time, which suggests, what was the source of this unique socio-cultural paradigm? Was it just a feature of their development, or was there a deeper, perhaps mystical or cosmic understanding of female energy and its role in the universe behind it? In the Egyptian pantheon, female goddesses occupied a central place, representing the fundamental aspects of being. Isis, the goddess of magic, motherhood, and wisdom, whose cult role was incomparable. Hathor, the goddess of heaven, love, music, and fertility. Ma'at, the personification of cosmic order, truth, and justice, whose principles were the cornerstone of all Egyptian life. These goddesses were not just symbols, they represented active, formative forces in the universe and in people's lives. Perhaps the high status of women in society reflected this deep reverence for the feminine element in the cosmos. This was not just matriarchy in the primitive sense, but recognition of the fundamental role of creative, intuitive, supportive energy, which, as the Egyptians believed, was inherent in the feminine principle and necessary for maintaining harmony in the universe. Some unconventional theories even suggest that the ancient Egyptians may have understood the dual nature of energy, seeing the masculine and feminine principles not as opposites, but as complementary polarities necessary for balance and creation. Women may have played a special role in esoteric rituals or in the transfer of certain types of knowledge that were inaccessible to men because they required intuitive perception or special energy sensitivity. If some of the Egyptian wisdom was associated with lunar or feminine energies, intuition, healing, connection with the subtle worlds, then their oblivion could be a direct consequence of the decline of female influence in society and the suppression of these aspects of knowledge. When patriarchal conquerors impose their own rules, they may have unwittingly or deliberately destroyed not only temples, but also entire layers of feminine wisdom passed down from generation to generation. The loss of this balance, the oblivion of the true meaning of female energy and its role in the cosmic order, may have been one of the key reasons for the decline of ancient Egypt. Perhaps the civilization that originally flourished because of the harmonious combination of male and female principles weakened when this balance was disturbed. It makes you think, is it not hidden in the forgotten cults of goddesses and in the amazing history of Egyptian women the key to understanding the true source of power and longevity of this civilization? And isn't their oblivion a warning to our own world about the importance of restoring harmony between male and female principles, so as not to repeat the mistakes of the ancients? Perhaps in the silence of the desert, Isis and Hathor still whisper, reminding us of the old power that was lost, but can be found again. Rituals and rituals. Not just a belief, but a technology for interacting with reality. For modern people, ancient Egyptian rituals and rituals often seem complex, sometimes strange, but in the end, only symbolic actions dictated by religious faith and superstition. We see processions, sacrifices, chants, incense burning, mummification, and funerary ceremonies as part of their spiritual life that has no direct impact on the physical world. However, if you look at these rituals through the lens of unconventional hypotheses, they take on a completely different, much more functional and even technological meaning. What if these complex actions were not just acts of worship, but precise, multi-step program designed to interact with invisible forces, change reality, and achieve specific goals? Perhaps the Egyptian priests, being the keepers of the deepest knowledge, understood that thought, word, sound, and ritual action have real, tangible power. Their rituals could be a form of applied metaphysics, a way to channel energies, program reality, and even communicate with other dimensions or entities. Every gesture, every word, every detail of clothing and the object used could be part of a complex system of symbols and switches that activate certain energy flows. For example, chants and prayers recited in temples could be not just texts, but resonant formulas that generate certain sound frequencies that can affect the consciousness of people, material objects, or even subtle energies. The sense of incense could be not only symbolic, but also catalysts for changing the state of consciousness or creating a certain energetic atmosphere that facilitates communication with the divine. This concept transforms the Egyptian priest from a simple worshiper to a kind of consciousness engineer or energy operator. Their knowledge may have included understanding how to manipulate the human psyche, how to induce certain states of trance or ecstasy in order to gain information or influence the collective consciousness. Study the Book of the Dead or pyramid texts from this point of view. It opens up new horizons. They can be not just spells for the afterlife, but detailed instructions for moving consciousness, projecting the astral body, or even changing the structure of reality. The pharaohs involved in these rituals could be not just passive objects, but active participants in grandiose experiments, aimed at achieving immortality not only for themselves, but for the entire civilization. The loss of a true understanding of these rituals, their transformation from functional technology to empty symbols or superstitions, may have been one of the fundamental causes of Egypt's decline. When the priests who possessed this profound knowledge disappeared and their schools were closed, these rituals, stripped of their true background, lost their power. They have become dead forms, unable to generate energy or influence reality anymore. Perhaps this oblivion is the main tragedy. Egypt has lost not just its faith, but the practical tools for interacting with the world that allowed it to flourish for thousands of years. Even today, as we study their ancient rites, we may be looking at encrypted instructions for an unknown form of science that is waiting to be rediscovered and understood. Ancient Egypt, like many other ancient civilizations, attached great importance to oracles and prophecies. It was believed that the gods could communicate with people through priests, through signs of nature, through prophetic dreams and visions. The most famous was the Oracle of Amun in the oasis of Siwa, where even Alexander the Great came to get confirmation of his divine origin. But were these oracles just a tool of political influence and mass control? Or were they based on real powers of foresight and access to information from the future that we had lost? If the Egyptian priests really possessed such psychotechnics as mind control and astral projection, then the ability to see in the future or receive information from nonlinear time does not seem so fantastic. Perhaps they knew how to enter altered states of consciousness in order to tap into some collective field of information, or even the Akashic Record, a hypothetical repository of all the knowledge and events of the universe. This allowed them not just to predict events, but to gain a deep understanding of cause and effect relationships and cycles, which in turn helped the pharaohs make decisions and ensured the amazing stability of civilization for thousands of years. The prophecies may have been more than just predictions, but warnings or even instructions received from higher dimensions that helped the Egyptians avoid disasters or take advantage of favorable periods. The loss of the art of prophetic listening and the ability to interpret voices of the future could be gradual. As the priestly schools declined and their methods of entering altered states of consciousness were forgotten or persecuted, the connection to this source of information was lost. Oracles have become mere folklore phenomena, and their messages have become incomprehensible. Perhaps this blindness to the future and deafness to the voices of the universe was one of the factors that led to the decline of Egypt. A civilization that once could see beyond the horizon of time has been trapped in the present, unable to anticipate impending threats or seize new opportunities. Thus, the oracles and prophecies of ancient Egypt are not just religious artifacts, but echoes of the lost technology of foresight. They whisper that the Egyptians may have possessed an ability that transcends our linear perception of time, and that their longevity may have been due to this unique gift. And today, as we search for answers to questions about the future, perhaps we should listen to these ancient voices, trying to decipher not only their past, but also their warnings and messages that are still waiting to be interpreted in the silence of the sands. The Tears of Ra phenomenon and unknown energy sources, forgotten energy technologies. In addition to the grandiose pyramids and temples that rise above the desert, ancient Egyptian myths and texts often contain mysterious references to certain Tears of Ra, or primary waters of Nun, which symbolize not only the act of creation, but also perhaps much more tangible sources of energy. Although these concepts are traditionally interpreted as purely mythological or poetic metaphors, some non-traditional researchers suggest that they may have hidden memories of unknown energy technologies or natural phenomena that the Egyptians were able to use. What if these tears and waters were not just symbols, but an indication of resources or methods that could generate energy similar to electricity, but based on completely different principles? For example, artifacts are known, such as the Dendera lamp, depicted in bas-reliefs in the Temple of Hathor in Dendera. It is an object that surprisingly resembles an electric light bulb or a Crookes tube, inside which a snake seems to wriggle, a symbol of energy or electric discharge. Around this lamp are depicted priests and cables leading to a certain power source. Although official archaeology insists on the purely symbolic meaning of these images, a snake emerging from a lotus flower as a symbol of fertility, for supporters of the theory of ancient technologies, this is direct evidence of the existence of electricity or its analogs in ancient Egypt. How else to explain the absence of soot from torches in the long, deep corridors of tombs where fresh air could not work? Why aren't there soot marks on the walls that should have been left by normal lighting? If they had lamps working on a principle unknown to us, this would explain the cleanliness of their underground structures. Further, there are hypotheses about the geometric energy of the pyramids. Some theories suggest that the pyramids are not just tombs, but giant resonators or converters of cosmic energy that can accumulate and focus certain types of radiation. The Tears of Ra may have been a metaphor for the invisible energy flows that permeate the earth, which the Egyptians were able to capture and use. Perhaps the water in their sacred lakes or in the Nile could be not just water, but a conductor or storage of this energy, charged with certain frequencies or minerals. The idea that the Egyptians had the ability to use the Earth's heat, geothermal energy, or the static electricity generated by sandstorms in a dry climate is also not excluded. If they were able to collect and channel these natural forces, it would explain how they could perform grand construction work without visible power sources. Loss of this knowledge about energy potential, Earth and space could be gradual. It may have been related to climate change, which made some energy sources inaccessible, or to the loss of priestly knowledge about how to connect to these sources. When the Tears of Ra ceased to flow in their understanding, when their ancient batteries or resonators failed, the civilization may have lost its technological foundation and slipped into the Dark Ages, where this knowledge turned into myths. And today, looking at the Dendera lamp, we wonder, isn't this just a tiny fragment of a much larger and more advanced energy system that once powered ancient Egypt and allowed it to create wonders that challenge our modern science? Communication with other civilizations, mysterious exchanges of knowledge, and inexplicable parallels. When we talk about ancient Egypt, we usually think of it as a separate civilization that developed uniquely on the banks of the Nile. However, a closer look reveals striking and inexplicable parallels with other ancient cultures, separated by thousands of kilometers and oceans. Why in South America, among the Incas and Mayans, do we find pyramids that resemble those of Egypt? Although with different forms, but with the same idea of monumental stone construction and astronomical orientation? Why are there references in ancient texts in India and China to flying machines, vimanas, and technologies that seem to go beyond their own development, like the Egyptian riddles? These transcontinental cultural and technological overlaps cannot be explained by mere convergence or chance. One of the most intriguing unconventional hypotheses suggests the existence of a global, highly developed antediluvian civilization that preceded all known cultures. This mother civilization, perhaps Atlantis or Lemuria, may have possessed advanced knowledge and technology, and its survivors from a global cataclysm, such as the Great Flood, may have become teachers for emerging cultures around the world, including Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and Central America. They were able to pass on fragments of their knowledge of construction, astronomy, medicine, and even spiritual practices, which explains the striking similarities in architecture, symbolism, and mythology. Pyramids then become not just an Egyptian invention, but part of a universal architectural code, transmitted from a single source. Hieroglyphs can be part of an ancient, global language that has been transformed in different regions. Another version is repeated contacts with extraterrestrial civilizations. If the gods visited Earth, then it is logical to assume that they interacted not only with one culture, but also with different peoples around the world, transferring knowledge and technology wherever possible. This would explain why so many ancient myths speak of gods who descended from heaven and gave people civilization. These creatures could act as catalysts for development, pushing humanity to progress and then retreating, leaving humans to develop on their own. In this case, ancient Egypt was just one of the projects, one of the testing grounds for such a space experiment. Loss of these transcontinental connections and the oblivion of the common mother culture or cosmic source of knowledge could be the reason that each of these civilizations eventually died out, losing its nourishment. When the thread connecting them to the common source of wisdom was severed, their knowledge became fragmented and gradually dissolved over the centuries. Perhaps we are now living in the dark ages after such global oblivion, and only by studying these inexplicable parallels can we begin to recreate the picture of the great unified civilization or cosmic connection that once united humanity and gave it its deepest secrets. In every inexplicable analogy, in every similarity of symbols and structures, perhaps there is an echo of a forgotten unity that is waiting in the wings to be rediscovered and reinterpreted. The phenomenon of the sphere of consciousness in ancient psychotechnics, mind control and perception. Beyond the outward manifestations of ancient Egypt's grandeur, monumental structures and elaborate rituals, there is a less obvious but perhaps much deeper mystery, their understanding of the human mind and mind. While modern psychology and neuroscience are only just beginning to delve into the depths of human perception, the ancient Egyptians seem to have possessed advanced psychotechnics that allowed them to control their inner world, change their state of consciousness, and even possibly influence the collective field of the mind. Their texts, such as the Book of the Dead, are not just a set of spells. They are a kind of guide to changing states of consciousness, leading the soul through the labyrinths of the afterlife, which can be a metaphor for deep meditative or astral journeys. Consider the practice of dreaming and dream incubation in Egyptian temples, especially in sanctuaries dedicated to Serapis, in the Hellenistic period, or earlier gods associated with healing. People came to these dream temples with the hope of receiving prophetic dreams or healing. It wasn't just believe and see, it was a system involving fasting, ritual ablutions, chants, and special body positions that may have contributed to altering brain waves and entering altered states of consciousness. Egyptian priests may have been masters of hypnosis, self-hypnosis, and suggestion, using these techniques to influence people's minds, whether for healing, teaching, or maintaining social order. The concept of Ka and Bio, which may have left the body during sleep or death, also indicates the understanding of astral projection or the exit of consciousness outside the physical body. This was not just a philosophical assumption, but perhaps a practiced ability that the priests developed and taught the chosen. If the Egyptians really possessed such psychotechnics, then their complex hieroglyphic system could serve not only as a means of writing, but also as a tool for encoding and activating certain states of consciousness. Each symbol, each composition, could be a visual spell that could evoke certain thoughts, emotions, or even mental images from someone who looked at them with a certain intent. This turns their art not just into decoration, but into the neuro-linguistic programming of antiquity. This also leads to the hypothesis about the spheres of consciousness that the priest could create invisible but powerful mental fields that can affect the atmosphere of the temple, on people's health or on their perception of reality. The curses of the pharaohs we discussed earlier could be not only energy attacks but also psychic attacks aimed at the defiler's mind, causing fear, panic, or disorientation that led to physical malaise. The loss of these ancient psychotechnics and understanding the realms of consciousness may have been one of the most profound aspects of ancient Egypt's oblivion. When the priestly schools where this knowledge was passed on by word of mouth were destroyed, and their esoteric practices suppressed by the new religions, most of these techniques were lost or distorted. They turned into superstitions, losing their functional basis. Perhaps the true secrets of Egypt are hidden not in the stones, but in the depths of the human mind. And only by reviving these ancient psychotechnics can we rediscover the keys to understanding how this civilization was able to survive for so long, ruling not only the physical world, but also the world of consciousness. The Eye of Horus and the forgotten technology of healing, energy and medicine that transcends time. While modern medicine prides itself on its achievements, ancient Egypt left behind medical papyri that are still surprising in their depth and accuracy. Papyrus Ebersa. The Ebers, Papyrus, and Smith Papyrus describe complex surgical procedures, disease diagnosis, antiseptic use, and even knowledge of the cardiovascular system that was far ahead of its time. But how could a civilization that did not know the microscope and modern anatomy as we understand it have such advanced medical knowledge? And what if the Eye of Horus symbol, a powerful amulet that represents protection, healing, and resurrection, was not just a superstition, but a reference to a lost technology or healing method that transcends our current medical paradigm? The Eye of Horus is not just an eye. Its parts have been shown to correspond surprisingly closely to the mathematical fractions used by the Egyptians in medicine and pharmacology. This may be a coincidence, but it can also indicate a deep relationship between symbolism, mathematics, and medical knowledge. Some unconventional theories suggest that the Eye of Horus may have been not just a symbol, but a diagram or model of the energy field associated with the human body, or instructions for activating certain healing energies. What if the Egyptian medical priests had knowledge of bioenergetics and could use invisible energy flows for diagnosis and treatment? Imagine that they could use focused life energy, perhaps the same as the hidden Amen, or electrical impulses, as in the Dender lamp hypothesis, to stimulate healing processes in the body. Their knowledge of mummification, which involved the extraction of organs and complex processing of the body, could also be linked to a deep understanding of anatomy, not only on a physical level, but also on an energetic level. They could understand how to preserve not only the physical shell, but also the energy matrix body to ensure its functioning in the afterlife or for future resurrection. Perhaps some of their medicines were not just herbs, but alchemically prepared substances that could affect subtle energy channels. The loss of this complex healing system, based on a combination of physical knowledge and energetic principles, may have been gradual. When the priests, who were both doctors and mystics, disappeared and their sacred texts became incomprehensible, this advanced medical knowledge disappeared in time. The Eye of Horus was transformed from a functional symbol to a simple amulet, losing its deep connection with healing power. And today we may be on the verge of rediscovering these ancient healing secrets, which may have been derived from superhuman sources or developed to incredible heights in Egypt's Golden Age. In every hieroglyph that describes illness, and in every symbol of healing, perhaps lies the key to understanding the energy medicine that transcended our current understanding of the capabilities of the body and mind, and that allowed the Egyptians to survive for so long, preserving health and vitality beyond our comprehension. The phenomenon of Thoth and the Chronicles of Time, the true source of knowledge and its concealment. Among the Egyptian gods, Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, magic, and science, occupies a very special place. He was the scribe of the gods, the inventor of hieroglyphs, and the patron saint of all knowledge, arts, and sciences. He is often depicted with the head of an ibis or baboon, holding papyrus and writing materials, symbolizing his role as the keeper and recorder of all cosmic and terrestrial information. For the Egyptians, Thoth was not just a mythological figure, he was an archetype of true knowledge, and perhaps this is not a metaphor, but an indication of the real source of their amazing achievements. What if Thoth was not a god, but an allegorical representation of a highly evolved being or civilization that passed on its knowledge to the Egyptians, or even a collective intelligence that holds all the wisdom of the universe? Legends attribute to Thoth the authorship of hundreds of thousands of books containing the secrets of the universe, the stars, medicine, alchemy, and magic. These texts, known as the Books of Thoth, have been lost or never made available to mere mortals. If these books really existed, their contents might explain not only the astounding level of Egyptian knowledge, but also their subsequent oblivion. Perhaps these Books of Thoth were so advanced and comprehensive that they could not be understood or used without a certain level of consciousness or key known only to initiates. They could be written in a language that was not just hieroglyphs, but a multi-dimensional code that is accessible only at a certain level of spiritual or mental development. The loss of these books, or their deliberate concealment, would be a catastrophe for humanity, depriving it of fundamental knowledge. Imagine that the priests of Thoth were not just cultists, but living repositories of knowledge, trained from childhood to perceive and remember vast amounts of information transmitted through oral tradition, meditation, or even telepathy. The books of Thoth could be not only physical scrolls, but also mental archives stored in the collective consciousness of the priestly class. When this transmission line was interrupted under the pressure of external forces and internal changes, these archives became inaccessible. The disappearance of the true cult of Thoth, its transformation into a purely symbolic figure, meant the loss of the key to its wisdom. Perhaps it is Thoth who has the idea of cyclical time and foreseeing the dark ages, when true knowledge must be hidden. He could instruct his priests to encode the most important information in temples, pyramids, myths, and even in the landscape itself, so that it would wait in the wings when humanity was ready to rediscover it. Thoth, then, is not just a god, but a symbol of a forgotten intelligence whose wisdom is still waiting to be rediscovered in the hidden annals of time. After thousands of years of greatness and stability, ancient Egypt, one of the longest-lived civilizations in human history, slowly but inexorably declined, leaving behind only silent ruins and countless mysteries. We have explored many possible causes of this oblivion, from the loss of priestly knowledge and energy technologies to climate change and the severance of communication with the heavenly teachers. But what if this decline was not just the end, but part of a grand plan, and Egypt's true heritage was not destroyed, but hidden, to be rediscovered in the future? Perhaps ancient Egypt left us not only ruins, but also keys to understanding our own future, encoded in its secrets. The concept of hidden heritage suggests that the Egyptians' most valuable knowledge, their most advanced technology, and their deepest wisdom were deliberately sealed and hidden from the eyes of the uninitiated. This could be done through sophisticated encryption systems in hieroglyphs and symbols, through secret underground vaults such as the legendary Hall of Records under the Sphinx, or even through the transfer of knowledge to secret society that were supposed to preserve it until a certain point. The curses of the pharaohs could not only be a defense against robbers, but also a barrier for the uninitiated, ensuring that only those who are ready for them will have access to true secrets. This hidden wisdom is waiting in the wings when humanity reaches a sufficient level of development and spiritual maturity to re-understand and use this knowledge without harm to itself. Perhaps the decline of Egypt was not a fatal end, but a necessary stage in the cyclical development of mankind. If the ancient Egyptians understood the cycles of cosmic energies and consciousness, then they could have anticipated periods of dark ages and consciously prepared for them by conserving their knowledge. In this context, their disappearance is not a defeat, but a strategic retreat, an act of preservation for the future. As we live in the 21st century, we may be on the cusp of a new renaissance, when the conditions for unlocking these ancient mysteries are once again ripe. Modern technologies such as ground-penetrating radars for exploring underground structures, computer analysis of hieroglyphs, and even quantum physics, which is beginning to overlap with ancient myths about energies and dimensions, may be the keys that will allow us to decipher the last message of Egypt. Thus, the deepest mystery of ancient Egypt is not just a riddle of its past, but a message to our future. Its lost heritage is not a collection of archaeological artifacts, but a roadmap to a completely different understanding of reality, to the possibilities of human consciousness, to technologies that can transform our world. And as we continue to search for answers in the sands of Egypt, we may be looking not only for what was, but also for what might be. In this quest, we are faced with the question, are we ready for a truth that can destroy all our ideas about history, science, and our own place in the universe? And are we ready to accept this last message of hidden wisdom that ancient Egypt left for us? Symbols and artifacts, silent witnesses of unknown knowledge. Ancient Egypt left behind not only grandiose structures, but also countless symbols and artifacts, whose true meaning is still the subject of heated debate and speculation. Every element of their art seemed to be imbued with the deepest meaning, going beyond mere decoration or religious depiction. From the Ankh, a symbol of eternal life, to the scarab, which represents rebirth in the cycles of creation, these signs carry messages that we may not yet be able to fully decipher. What if these symbols were not just pictograms, but part of a universal language that could be understood by beings with a high level of consciousness, or even mnemonic devices containing entire arrays of information? Take Ankh, for example. Ankh. Its key-like shape is often interpreted as the Maquis of life. But what if it was the key not only to metaphysical life, but also to practical knowledge related to energy, healing, or even extending biological existence? Some alternative researchers suggest that the Ankh may have been a device or symbolic representation of a technology capable of manipulating vital energy, or even being a kind of portal or switch of certain energies. Its frequent appearance in the hands of the gods who pass it on to the pharaohs may indicate the transfer of not just symbolic power, but also a real ability to influence life and death. Or consider the Jed, a pillar symbolizing the stability and spine of Osiris. In some theories, the Jed is seen as a resonator or energy pillar, capable of collecting and directing energy, similar to electromagnetic coils. Perhaps these symbols, which we now perceive as abstract, were specific instructions or diagrams for working with energy, body, and soul. Numerous unexplained artifacts found in tombs and temples also challenge traditional explanations. It's not just about the Dendera lamp, but also about the mysterious sarcophagi in the Serapeum, made of perfectly polished granite weighing hundreds of tons, with a precision unattainable for manual work. What were these giant boxes created for, if some of them were never used for their intended purpose? Could they have been part of experiments with energy, resonance, or even portals? Or the mysterious giant bowls, shale, and basalt, carved with a striking symmetry and subtlety that modern technology would have found difficult to replicate? Why did the Egyptians, who, according to the official version, possessed only primitive tools, need such works of jewelry with stone? These objects, which seem redundant or illogical from the point of view of primitive technology, make sense if we consider them as components of a more complex lost system. The loss of understanding of the true purpose of these symbols and artifacts could be related to the disappearance of esoteric knowledge. When the priests who understood the language of these symbols and the functionality of artifacts left, these objects turned into simply beautiful or mysterious objects. Symbols became empty signs, and artifacts became incomprehensible objects that lost their true purpose. Perhaps the true secrets of ancient Egypt are still waiting in the wings, hidden in plain sight, encoded in every stone, in every hieroglyph, and in every symbol, waiting for someone who can once again see in them not just art, but silent evidence of lost technology in the deepest knowledge. Mysterious dungeons and unexplored depths, the gateway to forgotten worlds. Although archaeological excavations of ancient Egypt have been going on for several centuries, most of its territories remain unexplored, especially what is underground. Legends and ancient texts constantly mention colossal underground structures, labyrinths, secret tunnels, and vast chambers that supposedly stretch for many kilometers under the desert sands. These tales of the underworld are not just mythological fantasies. They may point to a real, unexplored underground infrastructure that was an integral part of Egyptian civilization, but about which we know very little. One of the most famous but still not fully found structures is the labyrinth, described by Herodotus and other ancient authors. They wrote about a colossal complex consisting of thousands of rooms and halls located both above and below the ground, surpassing even the pyramids in scale. Despite some recent discoveries, nothing has been found to match the grandeur of the ancient descriptions. This suggests that either the maze was deliberately filled in and hidden from view, or its true location is still a mystery, buried under tons of sand and time. Could these underground complexes serve not only as tombs or vaults, but also as functional shelters, centers for storing knowledge, or even places for conducting specific energy experiments that are inaccessible to the surface world? Further, there are numerous references to secret passages and tunnels connecting various temples, tombs, and even cities. For example, legends about tunnels under the Giza Plateau linking the pyramids, the Sphinx, and even the Nile often appear in alternative theories. Some studies using ground-penetrating radars do reveal anomalies underground that indicate the presence of voids and structures. If these tunnels and chambers exist, then their purpose could be much broader than just moving. They could serve as ventilation systems, water supplies, acoustic channels, or even energy pipelines that connected key points of the Egyptian energy network. Perhaps it was in these depths that the true laboratories of the ancient priests were hidden, where experiments were conducted that challenge our understanding of physics and chemistry. Loss of access to these underground worlds, it could be either the result of deliberate concealment to protect secrets from the invaders, or the result of natural disasters that filled up the entrances and destroyed part of the structures. When knowledge of the location of these entrances and how to activate them was lost, these huge complexes became inaccessible tombs of mystery. Perhaps the true scale of Egyptian civilization was much larger than we imagine, extending not only over the surface, but also deep underground. These mysterious dungeons are not just archaeological sites, they are gates to forgotten worlds that may have held not only untold treasures, but also clues to the very origins of human civilization, its true capabilities, and its hidden history, which is waiting to be rediscovered and shed light on the greatest mysteries of ancient Egypt. Beyond the grandiose stone structures, there are intriguing suggestions that ancient Egypt may have possessed the knowledge and use of invisible energy networks that permeate the earth, and possibly crystal technology to activate and control them. This goes beyond our current understanding of electricity or mechanics and hints at a completely different paradigm of interaction with nature. If the pyramids were not just tombs, but giant energy devices, then how did they feed and transmit this energy? Perhaps the answer lies in the deepest depths of the planet and in the properties of certain minerals. Some alternative researchers point out that the location of many Egyptian temples and pyramids is not accidental. They are located on the so-called ley lines, geodesic lines or energy meridians of the Earth, which according to some theories are channels for the circulation of invisible geomagnetic energy. If this is the case, then the Egyptians, or those who instructed them, may have had a deep understanding of these terrestrial energy flows and know how to use them for their own purposes. Temples and obelisks could act as acupuncture needles for the Earth, focusing, amplifying, or redirecting this energy. The construction of such structures at certain points could activate or stabilize these invisible networks, creating powerful energy fields that were used for various purposes, from lighting and heating to mind manipulation and even levitation. Crystals could play a key role in these hypothetical energy systems crystally. Ancient Egyptians are known to have valued precious and semi-precious stones, but their use may have been more than just aesthetic or symbolic. Quartz, for example, has piezoelectric properties, the ability to generate an electric charge under pressure. If the Egyptians knew about this, then the huge blocks of granite containing quartz used in pyramids and temples could have been part of giant crystal resonators or generators. Perhaps hidden in secret chambers or inside walls were crystal lenses or storage devices that focused and stored energy. The legends of glowing stones or crystals that radiate power could be echoes of real technologies based on manipulating the energy of crystals. The loss of these energy and crystal technologies, it would be disastrous. Perhaps they were too complex to transmit without a deep scientific understanding, or their use required special conditions that have changed over time. When the keys to these systems were lost, whether it was knowledge of ley lines, methods for activating crystals, or ways to interact with geomagnetic fields, the giant structures became mere masses of stone, and their invisible functions were forgotten. Even today, we may be looking at the remains of an ancient energy infrastructure without understanding its true purpose, while invisible energy streams still flow beneath the sands of Egypt, waiting for someone to reconnect to this amazing, forgotten source of power, terraforming technology and ancient climate. Egypt as an oasis in the heart of the desert. Modern archaeological research and geological data clearly show that the area now occupied by the barren Sahara was once a green and blooming savanna, intersected by numerous rivers and rich vegetation. This dramatic climate shift, which occurred approximately 4,000 years ago, he turned the fertile land into an arid desert. However, against the backdrop of this global decline, ancient Egypt, located along the narrow strip of the Nile, not only survived but also flourished, achieving unprecedented power and stability for thousands of years. This in itself is a striking anomaly. How could a civilization not only adapt, but also develop in the face of increasing drought, while other regions were falling into decline. Traditional science attributes this to the exceptional role of the Nile and the ingenuity of the Egyptians in irrigation. However, what if their adaptation was more than just efficient farming? What if the Egyptians, or those who were behind their civilization, had knowledge of terraforming in miniature, the ability to influence the local climate or maintain the fertility of the earth in ways unknown to us? In ancient texts, there are sometimes allusions to controlling water or summoning rain through rituals that we consider mystical. But could these rituals be a distorted description of technologies for influencing the atmosphere or underground water reserves? Imagine that the priests knew about hidden aquifers, how to condense water from the air, or how to use geothermal energy to maintain a microclimate in certain areas. After all, the existence of vast underground labyrinths and channels, which are legendary, could be part of such a hydrological and climatic system that ensures survival in a global drought. Some radical theories suggest that ancient Egypt may have been a deliberately created oasis on the planet, a kind of reservation or experimental zone maintained by the very heavenly teachers who may have possessed climate change technologies. Perhaps they used their advanced knowledge to mitigate the effects of the Nile Valley drought, creating artificially favorable conditions for the development of human civilization. This idea is reinforced by the mysterious stability of the Egyptian climate for thousands of years, when other regions experienced significant changes. This is not just survival, but controlled prosperity in conditions that should have been much harsher. The loss of this knowledge of climate and water control, if it existed, could have been one of the main reasons for Egypt's decline. When the ability to maintain this artificially created oasis was lost, civilization became much more vulnerable to natural climate fluctuations, droughts, and crop failures. The chosen land, supported by the gods, gradually turned into an ordinary agricultural empire, depending on the whims of nature. This makes us wonder, isn't the very existence of ancient Egypt in the heart of the desert proof of forgotten terraforming technologies that once allowed humans to control their environment on a scale that seems fantastic to us today? Space heritage and star portals. Egypt as a bridge between worlds. Ancient Egyptian mythology, art, and architecture are literally permeated with cosmic motifs. The gods who descend from the stars, the pharaohs who ascend into the sky, and the constellations that play a key role in their beliefs and the orientation of buildings all point to the Egyptians' deepest connection to the cosmos. But was this connection only metaphorical, or was it something much more literal? A cosmic legacy, and perhaps even the technology of star portals that allow you to move between worlds? Cult of the constellation Orion, Osiris, and the star Sirius, Sopdet Isis, was central to the Egyptian religion and calendar. The Egyptians believed that these stars were the home of their gods and the place where the souls of pharaohs go after death. The shafts in the Great Pyramid pointing at these stars are often interpreted as purely symbolic. However, if we accept the hypothesis of advanced technology, these shafts could be not just ventilation channels or ritual paths for the soul, but part of a complex device aimed at collecting energy from space or even establishing communication with these stars. Could they be a kind of telescope for observing distant worlds, or even more radically, components for activating the Stargate? The idea of star portals, points in space-time that allow instantaneous travel over vast distances or even to other dimensions, is key to many theories about alien civilizations and ancient technologies. What if some Egyptian temples, especially those with unusual acoustic and energetic properties, or the pyramids themselves, were not just places of worship, but transdimensional gates that could be activated under certain conditions? The legends of pharaohs traveling through the sky in the boat of Ra, or of gods descending from heaven, could be not just myths, but distorted descriptions of real movements through such portals. Stone sarcophagi, perfectly carved and with closed lids, can be not just tombs, but capsules for moving or rebooting consciousness through these stargates. Loss of knowledge about the space heritage and how to use the star portals, if they existed, would lead to a complete severance of Egypt's connection with its heavenly teachers. When the technology or the knowledge of its activation was lost, the Egyptians were trapped on earth, their gods stopped coming, and the pharaohs stopped ascending. A civilization that had once been a bridge between worlds became an earth empire, which eventually faced its inevitable decline. Perhaps the history of Egypt itself is the story of a civilization that had a direct connection to space and then lost that connection, and its decline was a consequence of this grandiose loss. And today, looking at their star maps and monuments, we may be on the verge of realizing that Egypt was not just an ancient culture, but a key link in the cosmic history of mankind, storing in its stones the silent echo of distant stars and forgotten journeys. Animal wisdom and symbolism, non-human teachers and coded messages. In addition to the gods who descended from heaven and the great pharaohs, animals played a huge role in Egyptian culture, Javotni. Their veneration went beyond mere worship. Many deities were depicted with animal heads, Sphinx, Sekhmet, Thoth, Anubis, and some animals such as apis bulls, falcons, cats, and ibises were considered sacred and even mummified. This is not just zealotry, it is a profound symbolic system that may indicate a lost understanding of the wisdom of animals and their connection to higher planes of existence, and perhaps their role as non-human teachers. What if the deification of animals was not just a metaphor, but a reflection of a deep respect for their intuitive abilities, their connection to nature, and their role in the ecosystem? The ancient Egyptians may have understood that animals have special senses and perceptions that are superior to humans, allowing them to pick up subtle energies, predict natural phenomena, or even act as conduits between the human world and the world of the gods. The symbolism of the Sphinx, the body of a lion, the head of a man, can be not just an artistic image, but an allegory of an ideal being that combines the wisdom and intelligence of a person with the strength and intuition of an animal. This could be an indication that humanity should strive for the harmonious development of these two aspects. Some unconventional theories suggest that certain animals may have been messengers or even avatars of the very heavenly teachers who came to Earth. For example, the god Thoth, depicted as an ibis or baboon, could symbolize a creature that possessed unique knowledge and passed it on to humanity. The cult of Apis, a sacred bull that was chosen for 29 special traits and mummified with great honors, could indicate not just fertility, but genetic experiments or special energy characteristics of these animals that were important for Egyptian rituals. If these animals possessed abilities that we consider supernatural, such as healing energy or the ability to transmit information telepathically, then their veneration would be completely logical. Loss of this deep understanding of the wisdom of animals and their role in the cosmic order has led to the fact that their deification was perceived as a primitive worship of idols. When the priests who could interpret the language of animals and understand their true meaning disappeared, the connection to this source of knowledge was lost. Symbols became empty signs, and cults became superstitions. Perhaps this oblivion is the tragedy. The Egyptians lost not just a part of their religion, but the key to interacting with the natural world on a completely different level, which allowed them to be in harmony with the environment and draw knowledge and strength from it. Today, when we look at images of these mysterious animals, we may be on the verge of realizing that they were not just symbols, but silent teachers whose messages are still encoded in every hieroglyph and every stone image. Forgotten predecessors and hidden chronology, evidence of an older civilization. The official history of ancient Egypt usually begins around 3100 BCE with the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the first pharaoh, Menes. However, as archaeological discoveries become more numerous and data interpretations expand, there are more and more questions about what preceded this dynastic civilization. There is strong circumstantial evidence and intriguing speculation pointing to the existence of older, possibly highly developed cultures that may have laid the foundation for later Egyptian greatness. What if the true roots of Egyptian civilization go back much further than is commonly believed, to an era that was intentionally or accidentally erased from the public record? First, it is the phenomenon of the sudden appearance of a highly developed Egyptian civilization. Unlike many other cultures, which go through long stages of development from primitive settlements to complex societies, ancient Egypt seems to have emerged literally out of nowhere, with an already formed script, complex architecture, and a developed knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. This leap in development looks illogical without the presence of a certain predecessor or teacher. Where are the traces of these millennia of gradual development that should have led to such a flourishing period? This mystery gives rise to hypotheses about pre-dynastic civilizations whose footprints may be buried under the desert sands or under the sediments of the Nile, waiting to be discovered. Further, there are anomalies in the dating and technology of some structures. For example, the Sphinx on the Giza Plateau, according to some geologists, could have been created much earlier than the pyramids. Traces of water erosion on its pedestal, according to them, indicate periods of heavy rain, which have not been observed in Egypt in recent years. $8,000, 10,000 years. If this is the case, then the Sphinx was built when Egypt did not yet exist as the civilization we know, and may be a relic of a vanished, prehistoric era. Who then built the Sphinx and why? This forces us to review the entire chronology of the ancient world and think about the existence of lost millennia, which are not recorded in official textbooks. Perhaps these forgotten predecessors. They were part of the same global antediluvian civilization that died as a result of the cataclysm, and their surviving representatives became the gods who brought knowledge to Egypt and other regions. Or they were cycles of human development when one highly developed culture was replaced by another, but information about previous waves of development was lost or deliberately erased. The ancient priests may have kept this secret story of the first time, Zemtepi, when the gods ruled the earth. But this knowledge was esoteric and inaccessible to the general public. The loss of a true, deeper chronology has meant that we see only the tip of the iceberg of Egyptian history, and its true, more ancient roots remain hidden in the depths of time. These hidden layers of history, if they are ever fully revealed, can change all our ideas about the development of humanity and its true origin. Lost military technologies and inexplicable superiority, armies of gods and pharaohs. When we think of ancient Egyptian warfare, images of chariots, archers, and foot soldiers with bronze weapons come to mind. However, given the general mysteries of this civilization, the question arises, was their military superiority solely the result of numbers, discipline, and the strategic genius of the pharaohs? Or did it hide lost technologies or tactics that gave them an inexplicable advantage over their enemies, contributing to their incredible expansion and border protection for thousands of years? After all, Egypt, being a rich and fertile land, constantly attracted invaders, but surprisingly long maintained its independence. Historical records, while scant on the details of technical innovations, often describe the pharaohs as warriors under the direct protection of the gods who granted them victories. This can, of course, be attributed to propaganda. But what if these divine interventions were a metaphor for using advanced technologies that were beyond the reach of their opponents? For example, there are many images of pharaohs hitting enemies with a single arrow or spear, or single-handedly destroying entire armies, which of course is hyperbole. However, perhaps behind these hyperbole, there are echoes of the use of weapons that were much more powerful than usual. Could the Egyptians have used some form of energy weapon based on the lost knowledge of sound, vibration, or electricity that we discussed earlier? For example, devices that can create powerful sound waves that cause panic or paralysis, or even emitters that can temporarily disorient or stun an enemy at a distance. Such technologies would leave no visible archaeological traces, but could explain the sudden and inexplicable defeats of enemy armies. It is also worth paying attention to the inexplicable accuracy and grandiosity of the Egyptian fortifications. Some fortresses, such as Buin in Nubia, were built with such a level of engineering that they can be compared to modern defensive structures. Walls of enormous thickness, a complex system of towers, moats and gates, and possibly hidden traps or mechanisms indicate knowledge beyond what is usually attributed to that time. Could this be the result of not only experience, but also the use of advanced construction techniques or even materials whose properties we still don't fully understand? If they had stone processing techniques as precise as the Serapeum, then their use in fortification could create virtually impregnable bastions. The loss of these military technologies or the tactic could be gradual. Perhaps when the gods or their representatives left Egypt, they took with them or encrypted the most dangerous knowledge for fear of using it for destructive purposes. Or, with the decline of the priesthood, these technologies, which require a deep understanding of how they work, were forgotten, becoming legends about magic weapons. When Egypt faced new, more technologically advanced or numerically superior opponents, such as the Hyksos or the Sea Peoples, it could no longer use its forgotten advantages. This makes one wonder if the history of Egypt's military victories is not just a chronicle of battles, but an echo of the application of technologies that could have been gifted or even created under the influence of the very heavenly teachers that provided them with such a long and inexplicable superiority on the battlefields. Astral travel and the concept of the soul, ways of consciousness beyond the physical world. The ancient Egyptian concept of the soul was one of the most complex and multifaceted among all ancient civilizations. They believed that a person is composed not only of a physical body, but also of many aspects of the soul, such as Kai, life force, double, Bia, personality that moves freely after death, enlightened spirit, and other lesser-known components. This detailed system points to a deep, almost scientific understanding of consciousness, its division, and its ability to exist outside the physical body. Was it just a belief, or did the Egyptian priests and pharaohs practice astral travel and other forms of consciousness transcending the physical world? The pyramid texts, the Book of the Dead, and numerous funerary papyri, which we consider only instructions for the afterlife, could actually be detailed instructions for getting out of the body and moving to other dimensions or other planes of existence. The descriptions of Osiris, journeys through the afterlife, the trials and obstacles that the soul must pass through, could be not just myths, but metaphorical descriptions of real experiences of astral projection. The priests who practiced these techniques may have been guides to the pharaohs, helping them on their posthumous journeys, which may have begun while they were still alive. The mummification and burial rituals may have been more than just preparing the body for burial, but part of a complex alchemical process aimed at preserving the Ka energy matrix and freeing the Ba for its journey. Perhaps sarcophagi were not only coffins, but also capsules or resonators that helped the soul to separate from the body and move to other worlds. This ability to astral travel could not only be a spiritual practice, but also a source of knowledge. If the consciousness could move freely, it could receive information from places inaccessible to the physical body, from distant stars, from the past or future, or from other dimensions. This would explain the Egyptians' phenomenal astronomical, medical, and engineering knowledge, which seemed to spring up out of nowhere. Some researchers suggest that heavenly teachers may have taught the Egyptians these techniques, showing them how to use their consciousness to gain information and overcome physical barriers. The worship of gods such as Thoth, the god of wisdom and the guide of souls, could be connected not just with faith, but with the veneration of those who possess the art of moving consciousness. Loss of these astral techniques and a deep understanding of the soul would be one of the most significant losses for humanity. When the priestly schools where this knowledge was transmitted were destroyed, and their practices were considered heresy, humanity lost the key to its own inner cosmos. The concept of the soul was simplified, and the ability to experience out-of-body experiences was perceived as mysticism or illness. Perhaps the true secrets of ancient Egypt are hidden not only in stones and hieroglyphs, but also in the potential of human consciousness, which we are just beginning to rediscover. Until we understand how the Egyptians used their souls to travel beyond the physical world, we will only be skimming the surface of their incredible heritage. Although ancient Egypt is not usually associated with genetics or biological manipulation in the modern sense, some aspects of their culture and mythology suggest the possible existence of lost knowledge about life, death, and the transformation of biological forms. Their unique understanding of the afterlife, mummification, and depictions of hybrid creatures, gods with animal heads, can be not just symbolic, but echoes of a deep, if esoteric, understanding of the principles of life and even manipulation of genetic material. Consider the phenomenon of mummification. It was an incredibly complex and lengthy process that required deep knowledge of anatomy, chemistry, and conservation. Why was such thoroughness necessary? Was it just to keep the body intact, or was it part of a larger plan, preparing the body for the resurrection or return of the soul? Some radical theories suggest that the Egyptians may have possessed the secrets to bioregenerate or even reset biological systems. If they had the technology to prevent decomposition and preserve organic tissue for millennia, that in itself indicates very advanced biochemical knowledge. Perhaps they used not only salts and resins, but also some kind of energy or vibration effects that helped to seal the life force in the body. The idea that the god Osiris was resurrected after Isis collected his parts and restored his body may not be just a myth, but a metaphorical description of the biological reconstruction or genetic restoration that was available to the priests. Further, there is the mystery of images of hybrid creatures, gods with animal heads, Sphinx, Sekhmet, Anubis, Thoth, or mythological monsters. Traditionally, this is interpreted as symbolic language. However, what if these images hide memories of real biological experiments or even genetic modifications carried out in ancient times? Could the same heavenly teachers we discussed earlier have had knowledge of genetics and created such hybrids for specific purposes? Whether as service creatures, guards, or even life forms better adapted to the changing environmental conditions? Perhaps the Sphinx, half human, half lion, is not only a symbol of combining intelligence and strength, but also a reminder of the attempt to create the perfect creature or of the genetic legacy left by ancient ancestors or aliens. Loss of this biological and genetic knowledge, it would be disastrous for any civilization. If the Egyptians really possessed such secrets, then their oblivion led to a loss of understanding of the very basics of life, death, and reproduction. Perhaps this knowledge was too dangerous to pass on to the general public, and therefore was strictly classified in the priestly schools. When these schools fell into disrepair and their secrets were forgotten, humanity lost access to what might have been the true magic of life. And today, looking at the mysterious mummies and images of hybrids, we may be on the verge of realizing that ancient Egypt held not only the secrets of construction, but also the keys to understanding life itself, its creation and transformation, which we only vaguely guess. Collective consciousness in egregores. Pharaohs as the focus of the divine will. Ancient Egyptian civilization was characterized by an amazing centralization of power and ideology, where the pharaoh was not just a ruler, but a living god, a link between the world of people and the world of gods. This unique cult of personality and its unprecedented influence over thousands of years suggests, how did the pharaohs manage to maintain such absolute power and such a monolithic belief system without visible signs of mass discontent or division for so many centuries? Perhaps the key lies in a deep understanding of collective consciousness and the formation of powerful egregores. An egregore is a concept in esotericism and psychology that denotes a non-physical collective being or an energetic entity that arises from the thoughts, emotions, and beliefs of a group of people united by a common idea or goal. The more people believe in something and direct their energy there, the stronger the egregore becomes. In ancient Egypt, with its millions of inhabitants, countless rituals, thousands of years of worshiping the same gods, an unquestioning faith in the pharaoh as a god, an incredibly powerful collective energy entity could have been created. The pharaoh, as the living incarnation of God, became the focus of this collective will, the channel for its manifestation, and the instrument for its management. His orders were perceived not as the instructions of a person, but as the will of the deity himself, supported by all the power of this egregore. Priests, as keepers of knowledge, could be masters of managing this egregore. They could use rituals, symbols, architecture, hypnosis, and other psychotechnics to constantly reinforce the collective faith and channel the energy of the masses. Grandiose temples and monuments served not only as places of worship, but also as giant accumulators of collective energy, focusing it and directing it to maintain the power of the pharaoh and the stability of the state. The hieroglyphs and myths that we discussed earlier may have been more than just narratives, but programs for consciousness that introduce certain beliefs and form a collective reality. Understanding how such a powerful egregore is formed and managed may have been one of the greatest secrets of the Egyptian priesthood, ensuring their incredible influence. Loss of knowledge about collective consciousness and management of egregores, it could lead to the weakening of this divine power of the pharaohs. When the priestly schools that taught these techniques fell into disrepair, and faith in the pharaoh as a living god began to weaken, the egregore began to deplete. This made the civilization vulnerable to internal divisions and external invasions. The pharaohs ceased to be unshakable deities, becoming ordinary rulers whose power could be challenged. Perhaps this loss of control over the collective mind, and not just military defeats or economic crises, was the real reason for the decline of ancient Egypt. And today, as we observe the phenomena of collective consciousness in the modern world, we may wonder, isn't the history of Egypt a lesson in how the power of thought and faith can shape reality? And that true power lies not in physical strength, but in controlling the invisible currents of collective energy, extraterrestrial intervention and cosmic cataclysms, external influence. One of the most radical yet intriguing hypotheses explaining the phenomenal achievements and sudden decline of ancient Egypt lies beyond Earth's borders, the theory of alien interference. If Egyptian gods such as Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Thoth were not just mythological entities, but representatives of highly advanced extraterrestrial civilizations that visited Earth in ancient times, this could explain the inexplicable leap in the development of Egyptian civilization. These gods could bring with them not only knowledge in the field of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering, but also advanced technologies that were perceived as magic, and their deeds eventually turned into myths. Imagine that grand structures like the Great Pyramid of Giza were built using anti-gravity devices or sound technology passed down by these aliens. This would explain how the multi-ton blocks were lifted and stacked with such amazing precision. If the Dendera lamp was really a device for lighting, then it could be technology obtained from outside. The very concept of the pharaoh as a living god could be the result not only of terrestrial propaganda, but also of genetic heritage or direct connection to these extraterrestrial beings. Perhaps some pharaohs or priests had unique abilities that were not available to ordinary people thanks to this cosmic bloodline. In addition, the myths about cosmic cataclysms and the Great Flood that are found in Egyptian texts and parallel with the traditions of other ancient cultures may be not just universal archetypes, but memories of real events caused by external cosmic factors. An asteroid impact, powerful solar flares, or even a change in the Earth's axis could lead to global climate change and devastation, as may have happened to the legendary Atlantis. If ancient Egypt was created or maintained by aliens, then they could not only help it survive such cataclysms, but also provide technology for protection or restoration. The sunken cities off the coast of Egypt, which we discussed, may not just be the result of rising sea levels, but the result of geological shifts caused by external cosmic influences. Losing touch with these heavenly teachers. It could be the main reason for the decline of Egypt. Perhaps for some reason, they left Earth, or humanity became unworthy of their further help. This would lead to the gradual oblivion of advanced technologies and knowledge that were not fully understood by Earth's inhabitants. When the source of external interference dried up, the civilization was forced to develop independently, gradually losing its divine advantages. And today, looking at images of strange flying machines on the walls of temples or at figures that look surprisingly similar to astronauts, we may be on the verge of realizing that the history of ancient Egypt is not only the history of Earth's civilization, but also a chapter in a much larger cosmic saga about contacts and influence from outside. Ancient Egyptian civilization, despite its remarkable stability, was not alien to the ideas of the end of the world, catastrophes and cyclical rebirth. In their mythology and cosmogony, there are frequent references to great floods, cosmic changes, and periods of chaos that are followed by new creation or renewal. Were these prophecies just myths designed to explain natural phenomena? Or were they encrypted predictions about real cyclical events that affect the development of humanity and the Earth? One of the key concepts was Zem Tepi, the first time, or the age of the gods, the golden age when the gods ruled the earth and humanity lived in harmony and knowledge. However, this time was always followed by a fall, a period of decline and oblivion. What if this is not just a poetic description, but a specific indication of the cyclical development of civilizations, where periods of high levels of consciousness and technology are replaced by dark ages of ignorance and degradation? The Egyptians might have believed that their own civilization was part of such a cycle, and their decline was preordained. In this case, their doomsday prophecies were not so much about total annihilation as about the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. Some texts and images, especially those related to the afterlife and soul journeys, contain symbols and scenes that can be interpreted as allegories of global cataclysms or cosmic events. For example, the myths about Ra's struggle with the serpent Apopos, which tries to devour the sun, may not just be battles of good and evil, but metaphorical depictions of cosmic catastrophes such as asteroid impacts, powerful solar flares, or other events that can disrupt the world order. If the priest had the ability to foresee the future, as we discussed earlier, then these prophecies might have been warnings encoded in their myths so that future generations could decipher them and prepare. Loss of understanding of the true meaning of these prophecies and cycles, it led to the fact that they were perceived as simple myths, devoid of practical meaning. When the priests who could interpret these encrypted messages and understand cosmic rhythms disappeared, humanity lost its roadmap for the future. We stopped seeing the global picture, focusing on linear development, forgetting about the inevitability of cycles. Perhaps the true value of these ancient prophecies lies not in predicting specific events, but in pointing out the universal laws of existence, that everything in the world is subject to cycles of birth, rise, decline, and rebirth. And today, as we face global challenges, these ancient messages can serve as a reminder of the cyclical nature of history, and that even after the deepest decline, there is always a chance for a new rebirth if we can decipher the wisdom of the past. Lost legacies and keys to the future, the last message of hidden wisdom. After thousands of years of greatness and stability, ancient Egypt, one of the longest-lived civilizations in human history, slowly but inexorably declined, leaving behind only silent ruins and countless mysteries. We have explored many possible causes of this oblivion, from the loss of priestly knowledge and energy technologies to climate change and the severance of communication with the heavenly teachers. But what if this decline was not just the end, but part of a grand plan, and Egypt's true heritage was not destroyed, but hidden to be rediscovered in the future? Perhaps ancient Egypt left us not only ruins, but also keys to understanding our own future, encoded in its secrets. The concept of hidden heritage suggests that the Egyptians' most valuable knowledge, their most advanced technology, and their deepest wisdom were deliberately sealed and hidden from the eyes of the uninitiated. This could be done through sophisticated encryption systems in hieroglyphs and symbols, through secret underground vaults such as the legendary Hall of Records under the Sphinx, or even through the transfer of knowledge to secret societies that were supposed to preserve it until a certain point. The curses of the pharaohs could not only be a defense against robbers, but also a barrier for the uninitiated, ensuring that only those who are ready for them will have access to true secrets. This hidden wisdom is waiting in the wings when humanity reaches a sufficient level of development and spiritual maturity to re-understand and use this knowledge without harm to itself. Perhaps the decline of Egypt was not a fatal end, but a necessary stage in the cyclical development of mankind. If the ancient Egyptians understood the cycles of cosmic energies and consciousness, then they could have anticipated periods of dark ages and consciously prepared for them by conserving what their knowledge. In this context, their disappearance is not a defeat, but a strategic retreat, an act of preservation for the future. As we live in the 21st century, we may be on the cusp of a new renaissance, when the conditions for unlocking these ancient mysteries are once again ripe. Modern technologies such as ground-penetrating radars for exploring underground structures, computer analysis of hieroglyphs, and even quantum physics, which is beginning to overlap with ancient myths about energies and dimensions, may be the keys that will allow us to decipher the last message of Egypt. Thus, the deepest mystery of ancient Egypt is not just a riddle of its past, but a message to our future. His lost legacy is not a collection of archaeological artifacts, but a roadmap to a completely different understanding of reality, to the possibilities of human consciousness, to technologies that can transform our world. And as we continue to search for answers in the sands of Egypt, we may be looking not only for what was, but also for what might be. In this quest, we are faced with the question, are we ready for a truth that can destroy all our ideas about history, science, and our own place in the universe? And are we ready to accept this last message of hidden wisdom that ancient Egypt left for us? The Amarna Mystery and the Akhenaten Revolution, a reboot attempt or a space experiment? One of the most striking and still unexplained episodes in the history of ancient Egypt is the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten, Amenhotep IV, who around 1353 BC undertook a radical religious reform, rejecting traditional polytheism and introducing the cult of a single god, Aten, the solar disk. He even built a new capital, Amarna, and changed the traditional art style. This religious and cultural revolution was so unprecedented and violent for conservative Egypt that immediately after his death, all of his reforms were reversed, his name erased from the annals, and his capital abandoned and destroyed. What was behind this so abrupt and so abruptly ended attempt to overturn millennial foundations? Traditional history explains this as personal fanaticism or political ambitions of Akhenaten, who sought to weaken the power of the priesthood of Amun. However, if we look at it through the prism of our hypotheses, this reform takes on a much deeper, perhaps cosmic meaning. What if the Aten was not just an abstract solar disk, but a symbol or even a direct indication of some alien patron or a new energy source that Akhenaten tried to present to the Egyptians? The images of Aten emitting rays ending in life-giving arms may not have been just an artistic device, but an image of invisible energy or technology that Akhenaten was trained in. Perhaps he was trying to switch Egypt to a new kind of energy or to a new form of interaction with the gods that was different from the traditional cult of Amun. The physical features of Akhenaten, depicted with an elongated skull, wide hips, and a peculiar face, also raise questions. Were these artistic exaggerations, or did they reflect real genetic mutations or changes, possibly caused by his contacts or heredity? Some theories suggest that Akhenaten may have been a hybrid or have a direct genetic heritage from the extraterrestrial beings who initiated this reform. At that time, his attempt to introduce monotheism was not just religious, but an attempt to reset civilization, directing its development along a new path, perhaps more consistent with the plan of his heavenly teachers. The fact that this reform was so violently suppressed and erased from history indicates that it was a serious threat for the established priestly elite and their control over traditional knowledge and energies. Perhaps the priests of Amun, who had their own ancient technologies and connections, saw Akhenaten's reforms as a danger to their own power and, more importantly, to the very balance of Egyptian civilization. So the Amarna period is not just a glitch in history, but a dramatic battle for Egypt's future, a battle between old, deeply rooted forces and a new radical paradigm, perhaps initiated from outside. The Amarna mystery is the key to understanding how much external forces or internal conflicts over access to knowledge may have influenced the fate of one of the greatest civilizations in history. Our journey through the millennia of ancient Egypt's mysteries is coming to an end, but the questions it has raised are only multiplying, like the desert dunes that hold innumerable secrets beneath them. We've touched on mysteries that challenge our current understanding of history, science, and the possibilities of the human mind. From the astounding precision of pyramids and temples whispering about sacred geometry and cosmic proportions, to the lost technologies of sound, energy, and healing that may have fueled this civilization. We have looked beyond the veil of official history, daring to suggest the existence of more ancient antecedents, alien interference, and even forgotten techniques for mind control and collective will. Ancient Egypt appears to us not just as a civilization that existed in a certain historical period, but as a multidimensional phenomenon whose true depth still remains incomprehensible. Its greatness was not limited to pharaohs and the worship of gods. It may have been based on a fundamental understanding of the laws of the universe that allowed them to manipulate matter, energy, and consciousness in ways that we are only just beginning to rediscover. Their quest for immortality, their complex concept of the soul, their connection to the stars, and their prophecies about the cycles of history all indicate that the Egyptians possessed a wisdom that transcended time. The greatest mystery of Egypt is not that it disappeared, but why and how it went into oblivion. Was it the result of natural processes, external cataclysms, or was it a deliberate act of concealment when the keepers of knowledge decided to seal their innermost secrets, waiting for more favorable times? Perhaps they understood the inevitability of the Dark Ages and deliberately left encrypted messages and keys, hidden in stone, hieroglyphs, myths, and the very fabric of their culture for those who would come after them. And today, as we stand on the threshold of a new era, burdened with challenges and hungry for answers, ancient Egypt speaks to us from the depths of time. Its silent monuments, mysterious artifacts, and mystical texts are not just monuments of a bygone era, but the last testament from a civilization that may have known more about our universe and ourselves than we can imagine. They invite us not only to unravel their past, but also to rethink our own future, offering an alternative view of the possibilities of humanity, its connection with the cosmos, and the infinite cyclicity of being. And as long as these secrets remain unsolved, as long as every stone whispers of forgotten knowledge, ancient Egypt will continue to be an echo of eternity, a silent reminder that true wisdom is often hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who can not only see but also hear its call. Perhaps the answers we seek are not only in their tombs, but also in the depths of our own yet-to-be-revealed consciousness.